Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Knocking down the second giraffe as it exploded onto the ground, fainted with its eyes forming an X shape and tongue sticking out. Very good. Luffy nodded, seeing Enel's fists now black, but still a bit flawed. You finally arrived, demon. He spoke as Luffy raised an eyebrow, thinking this guy would never change. Well, I see you've learned to use basic haki, that's good. Luffy said while Enel looked at him, though a bit dirty, with a cocky nose and eyes for the demon. I finally have the power to defeat you and become a true god. He said as he clenched his fist, looking at Luffy as a challenge. Oh, is that so? Luffy smiled. Since he thinks so, let's see. Luffy murmured internally as he reached into his pocket for a key. Alright, take this. He said as he tossed the key to Enel, who caught it, looking satisfied as he moved it to his handcuff, pricking it open from his wrist. That's it. Haha, I'm feeling my strength returning at this moment. He exclaimed in ecstasy, as lightning began to course around him. He laughed like a madman at this moment. My powers, finally. No. They are much greater than before. This training has given me strength. Now I will be able to become a true god by defeating you. He looked at Luffy ready to challenge him, and before he could react, Luffy suddenly appeared in front of him. Since you insist on it, I'd like to see. Luffy said, and before Enel could react, Luffy launched a punch at the face of the self-proclaimed god. If this guy wants a fight, then let's see if he's really all that he talks about and the results of his training. Luffy smiled, as his fist buried into Enel's face in slow motion. The man couldn't even react as he felt his body explode the ground beneath him, digging it as he was sent flying backwards, creating a line through half the island while a huge cloud of smoke was raised, attracting everyone's attention on the island. They're fighting, aren't they? Kuina looked towards the center of the island from the beach. Damn, Captain, I wanted to fight him. Zoro murmured as he walked through the forest, seeing the animals running away from the place. He had already defeated a dozen of them for training. Who's fighting against the master? Baby 5 exclaimed while kneeling and cleaning the deck of the ship. Will the battle be as intense as in Skypiea 2? Usopp wondered, sitting in a beach chair. I doubt it. Enel is far behind everyone's training. After all, if he stayed here all this time, he didn't get the benefits of Luffy's fruit like us. Hugo commented beside him. Suddenly, lightning began to explode from the sky towards the island, making the entire island tremble as Enel unleashed all possible attacks on Luffy on the island's ground. You're slow. Luffy commented amid the lightning bolts, while Enel, with a broken nose and a bleeding face, looked frail. He was frustrated. After all, it seemed that even his training that made him feel truly more powerful had not been enough to face Luffy, because Luffy began dodging all the lightning as if dancing through the air, getting closer to him each time. When he punched as he approached, Enel vanished, turning into lightning and distancing himself a bit, seeing that he did not want to feel that last punch from the pirate again. However, Luffy was faster. He also disappeared from the spot, and Enel, even with his high observational haki, couldn't react when Luffy brought his hands together and lifted them up, delivering a direct uppercut to the ground behind him. Enel felt his back bend at that moment as he flew like a rocket, even amidst lightning, even resembling a natural lightning bolt falling from the sky. Enel burst into the ground, making the entire island tremble even more with Luffy's force as trees and even mountains began to collapse. Ow! Help! Help! Chopper screamed, frightened, in a corner of the island. He's overdoing it. Yuta complained on the beach. I hope Luffy hasn't killed him like that. He's bad, but he's still our companion. Vivi commented beside her. Nay. Almost dropped my takoyakis. Ecchi complained while frying his food. I want more. Yamato exclaimed from his beach chair, eating his takoyaki. Me too. Shirahoshi exclaimed from the chair next to him, swaying her tail. As the dust of the island began to dissipate, Luffy landed on the ground calmly, not far from where Enel lay unconscious in the middle of a crater. Wow, that was quick. Luffy commented, looking even a bit disappointed, but shrugged it off. He picked up Enel by the arm and swung his body as he threw him into the air towards the beach location. Chaochu, who was sitting on the ship watching some members on the beach wagging his tail. He saw the object falling near him and didn't care, only turning when he saw Enel hit the deck and roll on the ground unconscious, scaring even Baby 5, who transformed into a gun and pointed it at the fallen man. Chaochu approached, sniffed Enel, then positioned himself beside him, lifting a leg and relieving himself on the fallen god. Luffy returned to the beach at this moment and asked Baby 5 and Chaochu to join them. He set up a volleyball game in the middle of the beach, but somewhat regretted it because the beach was destroyed as they began to use their powers during the game, and the island was split in half because of it. In the end, they had to have a feast in the middle of the island while the sea flowed through the middle of the place. Still enjoying being on solid ground, after all, they always had feasts in the middle of the sea. The next day, Enel woke up all bruised while Chopper was there taking care of his bandages. What happened? Enel spoke with difficulty. You got beaten up by Luffy, so you should rest. Chopper commented as Enel knew what to answer to that. Chopper left as soon as he finished without saying much, leaving Enel alone. The little doctor approached the deck after taking care of his current patient and went to meet the others as they departed from the modified island. After all, it had become 2. Hey, has anyone seen Zoro? I wanted to fight with him. Kuina suddenly said. Zoro. I haven't seen him since yesterday. Usopp inquired. Since the feast? Kuina asked. No, he's been missing since we landed on the island. Robin, a detailed woman, stated, so he got lost as usual. I thought using observational hockey would have solved that problem. Luffy murmured hearing them ask about Zoro, as the island grew ever more distant. Meanwhile, Zoro had arrived in the middle of the split island. Strange, I don't remember this river. He said, and his stomach growled at that moment. Damn, I've been hungry since yesterday and can't find anything here to eat. Did Luffy and the others get lost? He murmured. Elsewhere in the calm belt, a ship with 2 large serpents was approaching Black Pearl, while Hancock let her dress sway in the sea breeze, eagerly waiting to soon meet her husband and the father of their daughters in her belly. Chapter 262, Meeting Hancock Again. Black Pearl continued its journey across the sea, and it wasn't long before it encountered a ship approaching from the opposite side. It wasn't difficult to see that this ship belonged to the Kuja pirates. The Pirate Empress. Lami commented, placing her hand on her chin. The first wife of Luffy. Nami exclaimed with some trepidation, after all, every woman wants to become the first wife, but that wasn't the case due to a pregnancy. Luffy saw this and just smiled, walking over to the edge of the deck while patiently waiting for his wife to approach. Hancock also came out of her cabin at this moment while all the Amazons looked at her, and she was waiting for her king, the man who had married their queen, to appear. The ship is approaching. It's Luffy-sama. He's going to meet the Empress, this is so exciting. The Amazon pirates began to exclaim while gossiping among themselves. Soon the ships approached each other, side by side in that perilous sea, but for both, no threat. Both the Straw Hats and the Amazons stared at each other from their respective ships, not knowing what would happen next. However, breaking everyone's expectations, with no one able to react to it, Hancock began to run at full speed across the deck, then jumped into the air and advanced. Meanwhile, Luffy did not stay behind, bending his knees, he kicked the ground at the same moment, also lifting off. Both the Amazons and the Straw Hats were slightly confused by this, after all, they were husband and wife. What kind of meeting is this between a couple? They wondered, expecting anything but what they were seeing now. Because at that moment, Hancock advanced at full speed towards Luffy, and Luffy did the same. Instead of a loving embrace between them, Hancock simply kicked him while Luffy punched her. Mugiwara! Hancock shouted with an enraged expression. Pirate Empress! Luffy also exclaimed, advancing against Hancock non-stop. A kick and a punch landed at the same time between the two, generating a force of impact in that area with both using armament hockey. Everyone, absolutely everyone, opened their mouths and widened their eyes at this. After all, it wasn't that kind of action. Then a fight began in midair, hitting and kicking each other while Hancock and Luffy faced off. The explosions of hockey continued while the sea itself became agitated by the force of the impact of both. This isn't a couple. This is a fight to the death. Usopp exclaimed. What kind of relationship is this? Vivi murmured. They are a very passionate couple. Foo-fa-foo. Robin commented with her hand on her chin. This isn't the behavior of a married man and woman. Nami exclaimed to Robin. I think each woman has a different relationship with Luffy. Nojiko commented. Maybe it's a love-hate relationship. Reiju commented. Like that book you lent me. Lami commented beside her. It's true. Reiju nodded. Hey, since when do you lend books to each other? Yuta exclaimed in surprise, after all, they basically hated each other. It's good to read some romances. Lami commented, shrugging. Anyway. They're moving. Yamato commented. This looks so fun. Shirahoshi commented. Luffy and Hancock began to move in the air while exchanging attacks against each other, kicking and punching each other, and began to leave the ship behind, while everyone still looked stunned at that, and they disappeared into the horizon towards a very distant island from there. Sister. Boa Sandersonia murmured from the ship of the Kuja pirates. The sea remained calm this time, while there was no more sign of Luffy and Hancock at this moment. While the Kuja pirates with the straw hats looked at each other from each of their ships. What will happen now? They thought simultaneously, because this was very strange. Sometimes, I don't understand the captain. Hugo commented, breaking the silence. How the hell is he doing this? Vive complained, while Yamato put her hand on her chin. What is he doing? She commented, walking around while having an idea. I'm going to check if Luffy is okay, I'll be back soon. Yamato said, and then kicked the ground, jumping into the air. Meanwhile, on an island not too far away, there was a small waterfall, accompanied by laughter that mingled with the sound of the water crashing nearby. Hancock's sweet voice emerged on that side with the woman herself, laughing joyfully. Luffy sat in the water while Hancock was in his lap, laughing and kissing him. Both were naked. Finally, some quality time with you, Luffy. She said with loving eyes. If any of those who had witnessed the fight up to now saw them behaving as they were now, they would be shocked by what they were seeing. After all, Luffy and Hancock had a relationship with two extremes, though the first was not a real fight, just an act. Are they worried? Luffy murmured, but soon put that aside and focused on the large breasts in front of him. They are growing. He couldn't help but comment. Yes, Gloriosa told me there would be some changes due to the pregnancy. She said lovingly. They have grown strong. Luffy said, touching her belly affectionately. Yes, they will be like their father. Hancock said, kissing him, knowing what he had done at Inai's lobby and that Luffy was stronger than her at this point. But Luffy. She continued. Your actions may lead the world government to make drastic decisions and hunt you down for it. She said, leaving a significant trace of concern. Don't worry, didn't you see that meteor a few days ago? I launched it at Mary Ejo's. Luffy spoke calmly. Hancock began to think about what she had heard. You did what? She exclaimed, stunned. I threw it at the city of the Tenri Obitos to threaten the five elders in a conversation. Luffy said. Make it clear that if they try anything with someone close to me to get to me, I would attack them. Luffy commented. Luffy. She didn't know what to think about it. But still, she was happy. After all, her man was even willing to kill that race considered to be at the top of the world to protect those he loves. I love you, Luffy. She said as she began to kiss him more passionately. Luffy did not dislike this and began to touch her intimate parts under the water, while he positioned her buttocks on his member. We have to be careful with our daughters, we can't have sex for hours like the last times. Hancock said, and Luffy nodded as they moved slowly, just making calm love in that place. They were there making slow love when they felt someone approaching, with an explosion occurring near them. Luffy looked calm while Hancock did not seem very happy. Who dares interrupt my happy moment with my husband? She exclaimed. Haha. I've arrived. A voice emerged from the dust smoke while a piece of clothing was thrown, and Yamato emerged naked, placing her hand on her waist and looking at them with a smile. Yamato? Luffy asked what she was doing here. As Hancock narrowed her eyes. So this is one of your wives that you married? She couldn't help but speak in an unsatisfied tone. But she couldn't complain to Luffy, after all, she had accepted it. Hello. Yamato said as she jumped naked into the water and approached. Well, I want to join in too. She said, smiling while Hancock, despite her displeasure, had to accept, and Luffy didn't mind at all. It was only after a few hours that they finally stopped, while Luffy took care with Hancock. The same could not be said of Yamato, who took a happy nap. So Luffy. Hancock began, after Luffy took this post-sex time to talk about important things while she dried her hair. There will be a war and I have to accept? She asked after hearing from Luffy. Yes. You can't refuse, after all. You'll still need to stay affiliated with the 7 warlords of the seas until the end of the war, and I will likely need you. Luffy said, knowing that Hancock. Yes. Gloriosa told me. I spoke with her. By Den Mushi. Initially, I didn't want you to participate, thinking of our daughter's well-being. He admitted, but Gloriosa was quite insistent on it, saying that it wouldn't be a great danger in the first months for the babies, and Hancock was strong enough to protect herself and the children. Luffy also took it upon himself to talk with Hancock about the war. Alright. I'll do anything you ask, Luffy. She said. This is good, my brother will be executed so I will get him out of there, passing through all the pirates and marines. Luffy said in a determined tone. I'll do that. But will we stay together after that? She asked. After all, she wanted to stay close to Luffy. Yes, I have a plan and I intend to move Amazon Lily out of the Com Belt. That will make the world government not attack them as a way to punish you if you leave the 7 warlords of the seas. He said, and she nodded. Let's go back. Luffy said and looked at Hancock, who was passed out. He called her, but the woman didn't care about him. Sighing, he grabbed a towel and covered her, placing it over her shoulders. They left the island, while returning to the ship. Luffy landed with Yamato on his shoulder wrapped in his towel and Hancock with the Kuja pirates while everyone was unclear about what had happened between them. Looking at them suspiciously. Luffy, what did you do with Yamato? Kuina complained. She looks so happy. Vivi commented, looking at the face of the sleeping vice captain. It's not like they fucked. Reija commented with a cigarette in her mouth. Luffy is so shameless. Nami complained. Womanizer. Lami said, shrugging. Anyway. Luffy ignored his usual wives and returned to Hancock. It was good to see you, let's follow the plan and inform me about anything. Luffy said, and Hancock nodded. Yes, Luffy. She said, not seeming the same as the one they saw fighting with Luffy. Great, now let's all get out of the Com Belt, Nami. Our next goal is to go to the Sabati archipelago. With that, both pirate groups returned to normalcy, while they started going their separate ways, while Luffy and Hancock looked at each other one last time as the woman touched her belly. Luffy turned his attention to the crew. I'm going to put Yamato to bed and we will follow this route without interruptions. Luffy commented and went to his room to put his wife to bed, while the Black Pearl headed towards the last island before the New World. Chapter 263, Germa 6601. The waters changed as soon as the Black Pearl left the Com Belt, finally reaching the waters in the first part of the Grand Line again, heading towards Sabati archipelago. Luffy was sitting at the bow above Ifrit's head, looking at some papers he had picked up from the day's newspaper and began to look at the bounty papers. Ustaz Captain Kidd, initial bounty of 350 million Baileys. Basil Hawkins, initial bounty of 249 million Baileys. Scratchman Apu, initial bounty of 198 million Baileys. Killer, initial bounty of 162 million Baileys. X-Drake, initial bounty of 222 million Baileys. Jewelry Bonnie, initial bounty of 140 million Baileys. Capone Gangbage, initial bounty of 138 million Baileys. Urge, initial bounty of 108 million Baileys. Looks like nothing's changed. Luffy commented, looking at the papers. I mean, Kid has a bit more than the original and his photo is with a huge scar made by Doflamingo. He didn't stop analyzing. Luffy was somewhat interested in some members of the worst generation, although his crew far surpassed this number, overshadowing them. He and Yamato had the highest bounties. The highlight reached the top, no one could take that away. After all, who is the rookie with a bounty of 1 billion received before even stepping into the New World, a record he didn't remember another in the history of the world. The only person I want from them is Bonnie. After all, I feel a bit of empathy for her story. She would also be great company for Kuina. Both are under 11 years old. He commented. Luffy. We found a structure in the middle of the sea. Usopp interrupted Luffy's thoughts as he turned to the indicated spot. There was a sort of resort with small houses in the middle of the sea. What is this? I don't remember something like this in the original. He murmured and let the ship approach. Let me see that. Luffy asked to see with the magnifying glass and Usopp handed it to him. So it is. Luffy commented while seeing the people in fear at the place, trying to escape from them. He nodded and already imagined how he could use them. Chow Chu. Luffy called and the dog appeared by his side. Woof. Woof. Chow Chu barked. You can get them. I want you to catch all of them and bring them here. Luffy requested and the dog nodded, beginning to step on the air outside the ship after jumping and heading towards the resort. Some time later, explosions began to appear at the location and Chow Chu had returned to his giant form, full of people in his 3 mouths, all fallen after fighting the dog. This? Reija looked at one of the men, startled. What is it? Lami asked beside her. It's that this one reminds me of someone. She couldn't stop murmuring looking at the man similar to her brother, fallen on the ground. Well. Now let's talk to them later. Luffy said. Wait Luffy. Why are you capturing them? Vivi asked. Because they will be part of my fleet. They will be going to Skypiea. Luffy determined, recruiting whoever he could for his banner. The journey continued towards Sabati, with them ignoring the resort in the middle of the sea and moving forward. Another day passed while Luffy and his crew had a routine. Luffy even cancelled the banquets preparing for war, putting everyone in training since yesterday. Come on, I don't want to have to rescue any of your butts in the war. So better get prepared. Luffy returned to his version of a ruthless and heartless coach, while increasing the gravity of the place by 90 times, given his evolution with his fruit. I'm almost reaching 100 times. Luffy was satisfied, he was becoming more powerful by the day. Meanwhile, many of the crew members were lying on the ground, trying to react after Luffy's training. Don't get so down, that was just a warm-up, we'll have a few more before participating in the fight at Manafort. Luffy said, after all, he wanted his crew to take care of themselves in that chaos. Everything seemed calm, aside from the intense training for the next few hours, and the crew was getting ready to start leaving. However, at that moment, the ship's alarm sounded. Everyone looked at it and then turned their gaze to their captain. Let's see what's happening, Luffy said, trying to figure out who it could be. Luffy was the first to step out onto the deck. It was late afternoon at that moment as the sky was orange with the sunset, but seeing a huge structure approaching the ship, he was surprised by a big name on the front of that thing. Germa 66. This must be a joke. Luffy couldn't help but murmur, after all, he could never have imagined Germa approaching them at that moment. Thus, the crew, who began to emerge from the deck to see that thing coming, Reiju was one of them. When she saw the large structure approaching, she froze for a moment. Luffy turned to look at her at that instant and approached. Do you have any idea why they are coming? Luffy asked. After all, Germa shouldn't be enough to fight against them, and they themselves should know that. So, it didn't make much sense. No, I don't know why they are coming, maybe it has to do with my only alive status on the wanted poster? She spoke with a somber tone. After all, she did not like her family. Deep down she knew they would come as soon as her name appeared in the newspaper, but she never imagined it would be so fast and still with them believing they could beat them alone. After all, they didn't have any other fleet with them. Well, if that's the case, let's see what they want and beat them up if possible, you don't need to worry. Luffy commented as he looked until the ship appeared small to that thing. Will I meet Sanji for the first time? Luffy couldn't help but think, after all, he was always curious about the fate of the original cook. Reiju said he was the intimidated boy as always, but in this world she was his companion, while she ended up shipwrecked and found F. Do you want to handle them? He asked. But with a mischievous smile. What are you going to do? She asked, not knowing how to respond. Well, I'm thinking of turning my father-in-law into subordinate. What do you think? Luffy replied, and Reiju was even more speechless. The ship, being carried by a huge snail, approached and on the deck, a large man came out, followed by several soldiers, including 3 children wearing Germa's clothes. Luffy looked at that and was thoughtful, thinking about the lack of one of Reiju's brothers that he most wanted to see. What a giant Mushi! Chopper shouted. What a strange ship! Zoro murmured. This old man. He really showed up. Reiju spoke with a furrowed brow. The man looked at them for a while, until he finally decided to speak, shouting down, after all, even Black Pearl was small compared to that ship. Reiju. The man spoke, calling his daughter, and Luffy raised an eyebrow. He has the nerve to talk like that, without addressing me first. He murmured. What do you want? Suddenly Reiju's voice came out, as many looked surprised at her. After all, this was her family, one that she disliked, known by many there. I came to pick you up. He spoke arrogantly, leaving everyone beside Luffy astonished with that. Even Luffy, not believing that guy, after all, he is not strong, his strength should reach one of the weaker vice-admirals. Which made Luffy wonder where all his courage came from. And why would I do that? Reiju responded with an even darker tone. Because I am your father and I want you to come with us. It's not just for me, but Big Mom, one of the 4 emperors, wants you and your crew to come to her territory. He explained. You think we would simply kneel to one of the emperors? Reiju recognized the strength of her crew, also thinking that her father's irrational demands were absurd. They weren't even in the waters of the New World to think they could have any command there. Her crew wouldn't take long to reach the level of an emperor. This is a direct order from my mother. Suddenly a new person appeared, and Luffy raised an eyebrow. After all, this was one of Big Mom's children, Cracker, perhaps the second strongest among them. Big Mom thinks sending one of her children would advance something? Luffy wondered. Well, it seems her children are quite arrogant, more than they can be, more arrogant than intelligent. Big Mom was a fool if she thought she could control us just by using her fame in the New World. We fear no one in this world. Cracker looked at Luffy. You may have fought against 7 warlords of the seas, some other commanders from Kaido, an admiral, but don't forget that the 4 emperors are above all that. Mujiwara, if you think you can fight with us, you are mistaken. Cracker spoke with a somber tone, looking at Luffy. Now we give you a choice, come with us to the New World, otherwise, you will be exterminated there. Cracker said. It seemed they were unaware of the war that was about to begin. Everything fell silent right after these words. All members of Luffy's crew looked at their captain waiting for his response. After all, a 4 emperor was not something they were concerned about anymore. Luffy began to laugh softly, growing louder as he laughed more. People looked astonished. Suddenly, his laughter turned into anger, starting to expand everything with the king's haki, causing all the soldiers on the Germa's ship to fall to the ground. Even the giant snail itself had also fallen. Cracker furrowed his brow as he and only the Vinsmoke family remained conscious. If that's what you want, then so be it, you arrogant fools. Luffy still couldn't believe they came here to threaten them, and it was time to show them what happened, because it seemed they hadn't learned from Kaido's situation. Luffy, raising his hand, a great stream of fire began to appear. What is he doing? Cracker didn't finish before Luffy released his attack. Well, if that's how it is, then die. He said and launched a blast of purple flames towards the structure, and before anyone could react, it exploded, catching everyone there in the explosion, lighting up the early evening. Chapter 264, Germa 6602. The explosion was so large that even Caracal, knocked out by Luffy's haki, woke up startled, looking at the flames burning on his back and starting to blow out the fire. This made the scene quite strange. Luffy, you can't burn him. Yamato exclaimed. He seems like a good mount, she declared, while John looked at her strangely. You've wanted a horse ever since you lost Cerberus. Luffy couldn't help but mutter to his vice-captain. As the snail continued trying to extinguish the fire, Reiju approached Luffy, her face showing some conflict. What are we going to do? She asked. It's obvious, we're going to finish them off. Luffy responded, touching his woman. Wait. Reiju called him one last time. I can take care of my family. She pleaded, and Luffy nodded. Alright, but I intend to make them prisoners and send them to Skypiea, is that okay with you? He asked her. That's fine. She nodded her head, and with that, Luffy quickly shot up into the sky. Reiju followed him immediately, stepping into the air with Moonwalk. Just the two of them headed into battle while the rest of the crew remained on the Black Pearl, seeing that the battle was easy enough for just the two of them. In the midst of the flames, Vinsmoke Judge looked on, his teeth clenched in frustration. He dares to attack us? We are with an emperor. He thought, after all, even if they refused to go to Big Mom, they certainly wouldn't attack the four emperors' flag so openly. Now he saw he was mistaken. His gaze quickly returned to the pirate ship as two people flew towards them at high speed. They were just a flash in the air, but what caught his attention was the woman in pink approaching quickly. Reiju? What are you? He didn't even finish his sentence due to an explosion from Reiju in the air, transforming into her own face as wings of fire glowed behind her and flames began to emerge on her, gaining a great boost of multiplied strength. Judge couldn't react as he felt his face being pressed by the other party at that moment. With Reiju already hitting him with a direct kick, attacking him. I've always wanted to do this for everything you cause, not just to me, but to Sanji as well. She thought as she felt her kick sink deeper until the opponent's body exploded with the impact, burying into the wood of the deck, breaking everything with his own body. Reiju's three other brothers quickly stepped back and pressed buttons on their clothing, using the Germa 66 suits covering their bodies rapidly. What do you think you did to our father, Reiju? We'll deal with you like we did in the old days. They exclaimed angrily. As the flames burned and a giant snail continued to remain, biscuit dolls quickly began to appear, running towards the flames and jumping into them to smother and extinguish them. With the number of dolls, they were managing to control the fire. Cracker looked at this with a furrowed brow, as it was a declaration of war from this supernova. However, his gaze left the flames seeing his ally being thrown into the ship while another enemy approached, directly towards him, the perpetrator of this attack. Luffy sped towards him, amidst the debris caused by Reiju, and felt Big Mom's son draw his sword, while he did the same. He quickly appeared in front of Cracker with ace in hand, and both his sword and Cracker's, called pretzel, collided with each other at that moment, filling the environment with a metallic and sharp sound. Do you know what you're doing? He said as he tried to stop the sword full of red lightning sparking around it. I know very well, son of Big Mom, but you should know that I would not be afraid of you or your mommy. Just don't go crying to her like a baby. Take this. He taunted, before unleashing the red thunder from the sword, catching Cracker unprepared, as a giant electric discharge exploded from the sword without him being able to defend in time, and throwing him back the next moment. His body flew like a bullet, hitting the main mast of the ship as it exploded, and he continued flying towards the cabin right behind, blowing up the rest of the ship's surface. As the mast with the Germa flag fell to the side of the ship, the snail was still blowing and putting out fire along with Cracker's biscuits, but quite frightened by what was happening on its deck. The war on the ship continued, and Reiju's brothers quickly began to fight against her. Pay for what you did, Reiju. Vinsmoke Ecchi exclaimed, trying to kick her. Reiju didn't care about that, easily dodging a kick while turning upwards and seeing a brother using Moonwalk trying to hit her from above. She quickly flew up to him, with both crossing feet with a kick from the other. However, Reiju's foot was more powerful. This is bad. She's using hockey. Her brother, Vinsmoke Nijai, commented before starting to lose impact and flying off to the opposite side in a seawater explosion as he fell out of the ship. Ecchi went to her while she once again dodged his attacks, until she counterattacked and launched a precise attack on him, throwing him onto the ship. Her last brother, Vinsmoke Hyunji, also tried to attack her quickly, but she spun her foot and launched a red flame with a cut in the air like a navy technique, as the flames transformed into a giant fire phoenix, flying towards him and catching him off guard, making him explode in the air. "Ah!" was the only thing he said before falling burned. On Luffy's side, several biscuit dolls began to emerge from the cabin where Craker's body had exploded, coming towards Luffy. "I remember these biscuits are very tough without water. Let's see if they can withstand this." Luffy thought and quickly moved his feet and spun his body half a degree to a stance while concentrating to throw a direct punch at them. A pose like Whitebeard would make, but he was preparing for a punch in the style of Garp. More fruit model, amplify human devil fruit, strength, apply 90 times. He gave his mental command, increasing his strength several times, Luffy felt, while feeling his arm even tremble with his current strength. As soon as the biscuits got close, Craker behind, felt something bad happening as he had a bloodline on his face, felt that something very bad was going to happen to him. He quickly clapped his hands, creating many more biscuits as huge warriors and created some to protect him from what was coming. Luffy waited until the right moment, then launched the attack. Moving his arm like a flash while his fist was enveloped in armament hockey, he struck in front of him. The bag hit the air, but the space in front of him distorted with the impact created. What happened next was devastating. Luffy, although he didn't use his flames, still generated a blunt shockwave and filled the place with a sonic event. The space did something like Whitebeard would do, but Luffy created a pure shockwave that exploded. Not only could the dolls not withstand the attack, even though they were not touched, but the entire ground began to explode as they were thrown into a space in sound, where it began to run through the crowd of biscuits while his target was Craker right behind. The wave was also so quick that Craker couldn't even try to escape, while hiding inside a biscuit with his shields trying to protect him. The biscuits began to feel the impact, and quickly broke down with the force, being penetrated more and more in shield and shield. Craker began clapping his hands, creating more biscuits to stand between him and the shock wave, but this did not seem to diminish the impact of the attack, while breaking more and more biscuits. Cracker felt powerless with that, and could only feel his body suffer the attack while he exploded from within those biscuits. That part of the ship, in its entirety, exploded the next moment, generating debris to all sides, which was practically half of the ship. A water explosion occurred on the other side, as Craker sank into the sea, and like all devil fruit users, he came into contact with his weakness at that moment, going out of commission as he sank deeper and deeper. Judge saw half of his ship destroyed while he was still in the middle of it, staring dazedly at the situation. "How can this be happening?" he said in surprise, for as much as he recognized the strength of Straw Hat, he doubted they could act like this against Big Mom and her son. When Big Mom ordered the boarding of Luffy and his crew, he believed it would be a simple task and would not came to this point, and even though he didn't want to do it, they were obligated by the ties they had with Big Mom. After all, they had a treaty from a few years ago and used Sanji for it, so he had a boss and subordinate relationship with the four Emperor Su. This thought was soon interrupted, as Reiju appeared beside him. "Are you still awake, old man?" And before he could react, his head was pressed with a hockey kick, pressing him back to the ground, while even the great leader of Germa 66, who had dominated everyone in the North Blue, couldn't handle it, falling to the ground knocked out the next moment. Luffy landed next to Reiju seeing her father fallen on the ground. "You defeated him too easily." He couldn't help but comment. "I'm also surprised, after all, I expected a tougher fight." She commented. "It means you've become a powerful woman," Luffy said with some pride. "I hope so," she murmured, also looking at her two fallen brothers. "It must be nice to beat up your own father." Luffy couldn't help but comment, after all, Dragon had abandoned him, just like his sister. "He's not my father is Zeph." Reiju commented, feeling strange. After all, she had some grudges with this family, but she beat them so easily. Reiju. The seawater exploded and out came the second brother who had crossed his legs earlier. However, Luffy acted first before Reiju, appearing behind him and slapping him, before he fell cautiously. "Let's go to the ship, help me carry them," Luffy said while Reiju picked up the body of her father and a brother. Luffy walked through the ship with two brothers, while the snail was crying with only half of its shell still on its back, despite being all destroyed with several clones created by Germa destroyed by the small fight. Landing on the Black Pearl, Luffy looked at his crew waiting for him. He looked at Ecchi. "Ecchi, can you pick up Craker in the water, put these handcuffs on him too?" Luffy threw the handcuffs after taking them out of his pocket. Ecchi nodded before jumping into the water. A while later, he returned with a knocked-out and handcuffed Cracker. Luffy nodded and turned to Hugo, and asked him to take them to the prison, which the man did immediately by dragging the bodies. After that, his gaze returned to the snail, still crying. He touched the snail, reducing its size. "You look like a fine ship. I'm thinking of adding you to my collection," Luffy said with a smile. The snail didn't seem at all excited about that, looking quite scared, being caught by that man who was smaller than him before. However, now it was the opposite, as it was just a simple snail being held by Luffy's hand. After storing the surviving Germiclones that were arrested, he returned to the group. "Now let's continue our journey," Luffy said, and soon the Black Pearl returned to normal, heading to the last island of the Grand Line. Chapter 265, Sabati Archipelago 01. The Sabati Archipelago is a prominent island for pirate gatherings, as the last stop before these notorious groups finally enter the waters of the New World. Each year, various famous pirates would gather, and prominent groups would form at this location, becoming local celebrities after building their fame on the journey through the first half of the Grand Line and preparing to venture into the second half. As each year passed, these notorious pirates would discover that the waters of the New World were far more turbulent than those of the Grand Line, and they would understand why this place was nicknamed Paradise. After all, they were trying to survive in seas dominated by the four emperors. While many were destroyed and erased from history, some ended up under the wings of the great pirates, as the emperors always hoped to recruit powerful subordinates to further increase their strength and influence in the New World. A small minority managed to survive, trying to establish their place in the New World independently and even overthrow a four emperors to take their place. Sabati was a place where all these pirates met before their perilous journey into the next waters. Besides the meeting of these notorious pirates, the island also harbored many illegal trades, such as slave sales and other items that could be sold at auctions banned in most of the world, operating through the underworld, attracting people with money, including criminals, nobles, and even the Tenri Obitos. But what was most in the air of the archipelago was still its concentration of great rookie pirates. This particular year had become the year with the most super rookies since the era of pirates began with the end of Roger. A super rookie was always a type of forecast for what kind of change the world would have. They were people wanted with bounties above 100 million who achieved this even before touching the New World, and this specific year was dubbed the worst generation. In the middle of a square by tree number 25, a fight began so quickly that even the people there could not react. A large man, with small wings, characteristic of the people from Skype, fought against a man with an X on his chin. The large man was Raj, captain of the fallen monk pirates, bounty, 108 million. The second man was X-Drake, captain of the Drake pirates, bounty, 222 million. The fight continued as one contested the other. Raj used a wooden trunk to fight while X-Drake used his fencing-style sword, a foil. The fight continued as many onlookers would look on, and while the fight went on, without the people taking their curious eyes off, an explosion occurred in the establishment next to that street, causing smoke to envelop the entire place. As it disappeared, a man with long arms appeared, looking at the hole, posing with his long hand. From the hole emerged a man with scars, looking at the other. "You bastard." Grinding his teeth, they were both starting a fight at that moment with the first ones. One was Scratchman Apu, a member of the Long Arm tribe and captain of the On-Air Pirates, bounty, 198 million. The man with the scars was none other than Ustaz Kid, captain of the Kid Pirates, bounty, 350 million. As this was happening, the other two who were fighting earlier approached them, as a consequence of their fights, and as they exchanged blows getting closer, a fifth man appeared there running. He jumped spinning a sword and struck against Raj and X-Drake, catching their attention. "I can't let you interfere with my captain's fight," he spoke while quickly sheathing his swords. This was a member of the Kid Pirates, Killer, bounty, 162 million. All these five men continued with the fight among themselves, representing the iconic worst generation. All these pirates above 100 million. Someone exclaimed. "They won't stop fighting. What will happen?" A second asked. "It's obvious they are contesting each other. Unfortunately this island is the meeting between them, we must be careful." Another spoke. As the battle continued on the street, at a restaurant at the end of that street, a waiter was walking slowly until he bumped into a pirate and fell to the ground dazed. "I apologize, sir," the waiter said, but the pirate did not seem to accept. "You bastard, you've got me all dirty," he exclaimed as he drew his sword, ready to cut down the poor wretch. However, he was stopped by the hand of the man with the sword, who looked towards his captain. This man was Basil Hawkins, captain of the Hawkins Pirates, bounty, 249 million. "No, you should not kill him, after all, this man is not going to die today," he said while holding a card, seeming to read something on it and calming his subordinate. "Where's the waiter?" Meanwhile, At another table, a girl spoke while eating, waiting for her late waiter to come so she could order more pizza. "I want more pizza," she exclaimed, as feathered youths lowered the imposing man at the demand of their captain. This woman was Jewelry Bonnie, captain of the Bonnie Pirates, bounty, 140 million. At another table nearby, a man dressed in a mafia-style suit seemed quite bothered by this and looked frustrated, watching the woman eat in an uncouth manner, appearing wild as she sat with her legs in an unladylike pose. "You, take her out," he ordered his men who were also dressed as mafiosos, wearing suits and Italian-style hats. This man was Caponebridge, captain of the Fire Tank Pirates, bounty, 138 million. "But, Dombridge, she is a Pira." Before he could finish, the captain himself struck him, making the man fall instantly. "I don't care, just eliminate her." "I don't want excuses," he said, as his men were unsure what to do. The island had been filled by these 8 powerful pirates, while it became the generation with the most notorious pirates. However, this era was far from ending with just that. After all, there was one group that stood out above all others. Not only because it was the largest this year, but because it was worse than any that had emerged in the Great Pirate era. There wasn't a day that the people of the island did not fear the day they would arrive, if the day they finally anchored in the port. After all, who didn't know that pirate group that had been in the spotlight in newspapers around the world from the East Blue, creating their name even before reaching the New World and even considering that they would be the next emperor after the last event, leaving all their current rivals behind. The absence of this group on the island created a strange atmosphere in the place, with people wondering what would happen when they finally arrived. Would the presence of this group make the chaotic situation of the islands even worse? How would they deal with the New World? Could they destroy a 4-emperor and emerge as gaining their own territory in that contested sea? Or would they fall as just a group that gained prominence in the history of this era? No one knew the answers to these questions, however, they were recurring questions as people discussed them every day, waiting to finally see them disembarking at the port of some of the islands in the archipelago. However, as if by fate, it seemed that this day had arrived, and it would be today. After all, pirate ships that were sailing that sea, returned to the island, not because they had something to do in Sabiti, but because of fear. Fear that they saw at sea, as they saw the dark ship approaching. The people of the island were not to know sighting the ship approaching the port as all the islands that this group usually appeared on. After all, they were so notorious that even the worst criminals felt fear of their name. What rookie could boast that they were destroying the government's and Navy's biggest weapons since they entered the Grand Line? Who could claim that they were defeating 7 warlords of the seas and fought against all of them, not losing to any? Not that people knew of their fight with Moria, Kuma, and Hancock, but they certainly knew their fight against Takanu and Kizaru together. As soon as the ships both fishing and pirate warned of the approach, the place became chaotic while the news quickly spread across all the islands. "They are coming, we saw them at sea," they exclaimed, and people quickly became alarmed by this and anxious, running to spread the news. "They are coming here, call the admirals." Someone shouted. "You're crazy, this will start a war and we could get involved." Another responded. "Notify the Navy immediately, I don't know what we can do." What will happen? Nobody knows, but we must be careful. The entire islands had already heard the news. After all, many enthusiasts had gone to the port at this moment. They did not think it would easily create a war there, so they were there, courageously, to see the arrivals of that certain ship. This could be said when the first tiny black dot appeared on the horizon, speeding towards them at the port. This was the worst part of the island, where the trees numbered 1 to 29, with all the traffic and residents of outlaws, becoming the lawless place in the archipelago, and this ship chose this area to anchor, while even the worst criminals of the place swallowed hard. People looked on, while the crowd at the port grew larger, staring at the small ship a few kilometers away coming at full speed, approaching every moment. Soon, a strange event occurred with the crowd ever increasing, with people eager to see the arrival of the group. The ship soon became visible to everyone, while its flag waved in the wind, getting closer and closer. The large crowd of people watched, wondering what would happen as soon as they all disembarked. On the ship, the giant trees of the island grew larger as the ship cut through the seawater in that direction. Luffy was on the prow of the ship, with a characteristic smile as he approached the island closer and closer. "Finally, we've arrived here," Luffy murmured with his cape fluttering against the island. "Let's see what interesting things can come up. I'm eager to meet the residents of this island and what we can cause here." Luffy finally arrived at this place, which he had thought a lot about since he entered that barrel when he left Goa Kingdom Island. Chapter 266, Sabati Archipelago 02. Black Pearl continued to approach Sabati as crowds of people gathered in the middle of the harbor. "Wow, they don't seem to be that afraid of us here, they look like they're gathering to welcome us," Alvida commented, looking toward the harbor. "Maybe we are famous. I heard that this part of the island, Between Tree 1 and 29, used to be a criminal area. Nojiko commented to her. Good that you mentioned that. Luffy gave me some pamphlets of the island so we can see the areas of the island. Nami approached, handing out pamphlets to everyone about all the places they could enjoy on all the islands, separated by tree numbers. This is incredible, look, there's an amusement park. Chopper shouted excitedly looking at the northern part of the island. There are several cool places to visit. Robin commented, also looking at the island map. Luffy, is there anything we should do on the island? Vivi approached the captain. Luffy turned his gaze to all the members and said. Well, you guys can do whatever you want, but I'd like us to meet at a point later. You can have fun and, if you want to beat someone up, feel free. Don't let anyone talk badly about us. Luffy commented, already knowing that his reputation was quite powerful here and many people would try to muster some courage by messing with some of the members, especially those who seemed to be the weakest of the group. But there were also crazies like Kid, who didn't mind facing someone much more powerful than them if it gave them a chance to gain some fame. Like he did going to Jaya, but ended up meeting Doflamingo. Well, that sounds very good. Yamato said, wanting to go to some places. Yamato. Luffy called his vice captain, as she lifted her eyes to him curiously. Since you want a mount so much, here is a place where you can catch some flying fish that function like motorcycles. Moto? What's that? Yamato asked, not understanding what Luffy meant. That made him scratch his head. Here they don't use the term. He thought and turned back to his crew. Well, it's a vehicle that moves at high speed, much faster than Cerberus. He said while Yamato seemed quite excited about it. There's also a show happening near the park. You can adventure wherever you want. Luffy turned back to the crew, before speaking in a serious tone. Also be careful, this island is a place that tends to have many visits from Tenryubitos. He said, and everyone looked quite concerned with these words, frowning, while Luffy returned to his usual smile. Not that you need to be afraid of that. We can handle that by beating some of them up, he declared. Are you just joking? Many of them shouted with a grimace while some didn't know what to think about their captain's statement. After all, many still feared facing such nobles. Luffy turned his gaze upward and broadened his smile even more. After all, a new crew member was arriving. Meanwhile, the ship was close enough for everyone to see the details. Look, this is their ship, they call it the Black Pearl. So this is the ship of a pirate with a billion on his head. You fool, this is not just any billion bounty pirate, it's a man who can fight two admirals at the same time and still come out alive. Tell me, who else can do that at sea? Not even people with billion bounties can do that. The other complained. Look at that. Someone pointed to the sky, and there was a ship with the head of a lion and its mane looking like the sun, approaching through the air. It was lowering and landed next to the Black Pearl. After 1 minute with the ship beside, it simply disappeared in front of everyone. Luffy had caught Sunny Go and was greeting Bebo, who was still wearing the Black Power wig. Very well, in the end, now you can enjoy the island with everyone too. Luffy said to Bebo. Thank you, Captain. Bebo said, now not as brave without the wig, but still grateful. Luffy, anything interesting on this island? Someone powerful? Zoro asked, curious to face someone worthy of his current skills. It depends. Luffy commented. There's an old man here who is the vice captain of the Roger Pirates. What? Vice captain of the Pirate Kings? Everyone exclaimed at the same time. The man who lives there, we'll see him soon. That's why I want us to meet at a specific bar. He said. I think we have someone who knows him well, right, Ecchi? Luffy looked at the merman, somewhat surprised. Luffy, how do you know about this? Ecchi asked, looking a bit lost, since he was talking about Rayleigh. I just know, and... Luffy turned back to respond to Zoro with a second option. There's also a possibility if you hit a Tenryubito, an admiral is called, we can try that if you want. Luffy suggested to Zoro. Of course not. Zoro grimaced at the end. Who would want to face an admiral? Apart from Luffy, no one could fight them at this moment. Anyway, let's put that aside and continue our stay on the island. Luffy said, and Black Pearl began to steam full speed to the island. The ship stopped at the harbor, docking perfectly as they actually encountered a crowd of people with the gangplank descending and the Straw Hats beginning to disembark. Look, it's the Straw Hat Pirates. They pointed out the obvious, after all, no one else could use this flag without wanting to feel the wrath of a pirate group that had bounties above billions on all their heads. So, this is a group that could become a for Emperor Su. Some whispered. Look, there's so much race in them. They pointed as Luffy descended with Shirahoshi clinging to his neck, as she sometimes did. Yamato followed behind, showing off his horns from a race different from humans. There was Ecchi, a merman, Vippo, a minka dog, and many people. There was a diversity of people. Unfortunately, there was no skeleton nor cyborg to count at the moment, but it was still enough to shock all the people there. "We've finally arrived," Luffy said, stopping in front of the whole crowd that looked at him cautiously. He could see all kinds of people, mostly criminals, looking. Some even trying to have some greed seeing the diversity of his group to try to sell in the slave auctions. However, who could mess with the group that basically fought vice admirals, several 7 warlords of the seas? They were sea demons, unbeatable, they could not be messed with so easily, no matter who it is, even a Tenri Obito would have to think twice. Luffy not only looked at these people, for there were also some quite peculiar looks at them. After all, there was the worst generation, and all of them came to this port in a short time to see the one who led the group of this era. Kid was in a corner, growling and clenching his fist, knowing he was not on the same level as Luffy, who considered him a rival at that moment. Killer was beside him, just looking, his gaze also mainly returned to Roronoa Zoro, who he also considered as a sword rival. Capone Bidge was in a corner too, on top of a building, watching the pirates while his group was behind him watching calmly, smoking a cigar. Let's see how their stay will be. So this is a billion bounty pirate. Bonnie was sitting with her legs open on top of a tree, while the crew was on the ground. She kept eating and looked at Luffy and the rest with some curiosity. Rich was giving a big smile as he looked at those pirates, on top of a rock near his crew, but without any comments. X-Drake was also standing on top of a tree, just watching, calculating some possibilities. After all, he had a mission in the New World with the Navy while disguising himself as a pirate, but the emergence of Monkey D. Luffy with a crew full of mystical beasts might alter that. Scratchman Apu, the man from the Long Arm tribe, was also in another corner, smiling as he moved his arms, looking like a DJ. So this is Straw Hat, interesting, he thought, striking the same pose. Meanwhile, a man playing cards, who was none other than the latest rookie of the worst generation, Basil Hawkins, watched Luffy approaching while he began to see all the possibilities. Chance of winning a fight against that group, 0%. He stated clearly to his men, who seemed to be part of a cult. Chance of escaping if he tries to kill us, 0%. Another result came out for him. Chance of him killing us if he wants to, 100%. Another result, as he frowned. Chances of this day turning into chaos, 85%. Chances of Monkey D. Luffy being behind this, 90%. He saw each of these results, continuing to frown at each one. "Looks like we're going to have a busy day today, we better be careful," he commented. "Let's stay well away from Monkey D. Luffy." Luffy, ignoring all the potential comments being made about them, heard the sweet voice as his cape was pressed by Shirahoshi. "We're so close to my home, we can soon visit Dad, I want to introduce you to him," she said with some hope. "Let's do that later, Shira, but first let's sort out some things and participate in some important events that are going to happen," Luffy said. Then, with a big smile, he announced to the entire crew, "Now let's explore this island," he said as everyone began to move and, as Basil Hawkins commented, there was a great chance of creating major chaos during their stay. Luffy didn't care much about that, but knew he was about to make this island shake soon and wasn't even worried about the Navy trying to retaliate with the world government. Chapter 267, Sabati Archipelago 03. Luffy waited for everyone to disembark from the ship while he approached it and touched it, making it turn into a miniature. Enel was the last to leave, still somewhat bandaged from the last beating he took. "Come on, don't be so down, you can have fun like everyone else," Luffy said to him while slapping his back, which made the self-proclaimed god scream in pain with a grimace. "TSK. A god does not entertain himself with mortals," he murmured while trying not to show a pain expression right after the slap. "Whatever. Let's split up," Luffy said as the crew nodded, wanting to do their own things. They passed through the crowd heading towards what they had planned to do as each one wanted to visit a different part of the island. The news not only spread from Tree 1 to Tree 29, but the entire archipelago began to hear rumors about the arrival of the Straw Hats, with everyone becoming quite cautious. "I just got a call from the port. The Straw Hats are here," a man in a bar exclaimed while the others looked quite surprised by this. "Let's go. I want to see these pirates." Another spoke. "Let's leave the island, they are trouble and I don't want to be in the eye of this storm," someone exclaimed, starting to leave the bar. "We're also leaving, heading to the New World." Another crew in the bar spoke, leaving right behind. At the bar counter, the woman put one hand on her chin while smoking a cigarette. "How interesting, so they have finally arrived. I wonder where that guy is." After all, he himself said he wanted to see their arrival when the crew finally stepped off the island. She spoke calmly. Elsewhere, in an auction house, an elderly man was chained with an explosive collar surrounded by slaves like him, waiting for the auction to start so he could be sold to some noble. "What a bore," he murmured with boredom, unaware of the news outside his cell. In the southern region of the islands, where the Navy base was located, they began to get agitated since the news of the Straw Hats had spread. A man stood in front of rows of soldiers, giving a speech while they kept their weapons and stance aligned, listening to the speaker, a high-ranking officer from the base. They have docked on the island. We must spread out and watch every move they make. We will act if necessary, even if it costs us our lives. After all, we will give our lives for justice to fight evil. The officer spoke, hoping that all those sailors would fight to the death, despite the minimal or almost non-existent chances of surviving a confrontation against this pirate crew. The sailors, although nervous, nodded, thinking they would fight if necessary. The officer continued talking about his plans as they would spread out across the islands in the archipelago. In another room at the base, in a communications room, there was another officer speaking directly with the headquarters. So, they have arrived on this island. These damn pirates, they came out of Inai's lobby and clashed with 2 other 7 warlords of the seas. And even defeated Moria. Sengoku growled on the Den Mushi about this. After all, it was no secret Kuma appeared quite damaged while carrying a comatose Moria. This frustrated him even more as he was losing forces that should be used in the war. Luffy was a major headache for him, especially with a war coming. A war that he could no longer stop, no matter what happened. What he hoped was that Luffy would also be drawn to Manafort, to join forces and destroy them once and for all like they would with Whitebeard. What should we do, Fleet Admiral? The other side asked. Sengoku sighed, before speaking again on the device. I want you to keep an eye on every move he makes. Sengoku explained. Get all the Tenri Obitos off the island now. He gave that order immediately. After all, it was no longer a secret among the people with higher positions in the world government what Luffy had done. That crew could very well want to mess with that group of untouchable people, so it was much more rational to remove them before any conflict arose, especially considering how the Tenri Obitos are, which made even Sengoku quite nervous. Afterwards, the conversation continued a bit more about any strategy that might be tried against the pirates. We'll do exactly that. The officer on the other side said, finally hanging up the Den Mushi. Sengoku also hung up his Den Mushi and returned to the room where the 3 admirals sat in front of him. The first he noticed was Akainu, still a bit bandaged from the wounds of the fight at Inai's lobby and frustrated at hearing Luffy's name, while Aokiji seemed to be sleeping with a bubble coming out of his nose. Kizaru opened his mouth, almost saying, how scary. As his usual phrase. Sengoku sighed and began to speak. Well, I'm going to have to send one of you there. I can't let that group do whatever they want, but avoid going to war with them there. After all, we should save that for here, at Manafort, said Sengoku as Aokiji slowly opened his eyes, seeming to awaken. Who is going to go there? It seems quite dangerous. Kizaru asked, looking at one of his colleagues beside him. He saw Akainu, who was looking at him at this moment. He swallowed hard and his gaze shifted away. Well, Kizaru commented while looking at him too. Kizaru frowned and raised his hand, pointing to himself, and asked, clearly not wanting to go, me? Sengoku agreed with this. As of all the admirals, Kizaru was the officer with the best chance in a fight against Garp's grandson. You must go, Kizaru. I would send Garp, since he is the best choice to keep his grandson in line. However, as soon as he arrived at Manafort, he had to deal with some personal issues, returning to Impel Down. Sengoku commented, a bit frustrated, since as soon as he arrived, there was a mess, forcing him to make an extreme decision. But Kizaru tried to argue but was interrupted. Stop the drama, Kizaru. Go there and end the pirate as justice demands. Akainu growled and complained immediately. If you're so eager about it, why don't you go? Kizaru thought, looking at Akainu, since he was not keen on facing Luffy anyway. I'm counting on you, Kizaru, declared Sengoku in the end. Alright. I'll take my nephew, he said. Having no choice, Kizaru had to get moving as he stood up and left the room not very enthusiastically. After all, someone had to do the job. Meanwhile, back at the Sabati archipelago, the crew had split up while Luffy was still held by Shirahoshi. He continued walking through the islands. Let's go, Luffy-sama. Shirahoshi seemed quite excited while keeping pace with Luffy. Luffy was not at all bothered by the girls' enthusiasm as they continued walking around, heading towards anything that caught their attention. Robin, Kuina, and Nojiko went to the part of the island where the luxury hotels were located, wanting to see the place. Meanwhile, Chopper, Bippo, Usopp, and Yuta went directly to the park in the north of the islands, where there was a festival and rides for them to enjoy. Cotton candy. Chopper was excited about the idea of buying some. Roller coaster. Usopp and Bippo wanted to see the park. The festival. Yuta wanted to sing where there was a band performance. As for Zoro, no one knew where he was. After all, As soon as they lost sight of him, he disappeared, probably lost somewhere on the island and hoping he wouldn't end up outside of Sabati. Reiju and Lamy went to compete in some competitions they themselves created on one of the islands of the archipelago. "You're not going to beat me, emo girl. Shut up, curly eyebrows." They began to argue while scaring everyone around them as they ran from the two crazy women. Meanwhile, Ecchi had to take Yamato to the place where they sold the fish that they rode like a kind of motorbike, according to Luffy. "Come on, let's go," Yamato commented excitedly. "Nay. We're almost there." Ecchi had no choice but to follow the orders of the vice captain. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the island, two men and a dog walked through the streets drawing attention. "What's with all this gloom?" Hugo asked the other man. "I'm not gloomy, after all, I will be a god, just a bit out of action." NL seemed to try to maintain his composure, but his situation was not pretty. "Wolf!" Chaochu mocked him with a bark. "What did you say, mutt?" Onel did not appreciate a dog mocking him, and though he didn't understand what the bark meant, he still felt the mockery. "Wolf!" Chaochu growled at Enel. "This is going to be a long stay," Hugo commented, seeing that he wouldn't have an easy time there. In an area where various criminal operations spanned from Area 1 to 29, 4 women gathered in a corner. "Are we really doing this?" Vivi asked, a bit worried. "Of course, why wouldn't we? We're pirates," Alvida commented, adjusting her hat. "Think of the money, Vivi. The lovely money," Nami said with dollar signs in her eyes and drool dripping from her mouth. "I can buy some accessories so that Master can punish me later," Baby 5 declared determinedly. Vivi, Nami, and Alvida looked at her strangely at that moment. "Anyway, let's start here, then here, and finally here." Nami began pointing to various spots on the map where they would be operating. "Whatever." Vivi sighed and finally nodded. Alvida and Baby 5 smiled and nodded too, as the girls prepared to put on a show. Elsewhere, there was a man in a suit listening to the Den Mushi. "We should leave the island." Another man spoke cautiously. Bang! A shot was heard, and the same man fell dead the next moment, with the Tenri Obito looking on with disdain. "We are not leaving this island because an inferior being is here, do you understand?" He spoke, looking at all the agents. "Yes, St. Charlos." Everyone nodded at the same time, afraid of the wrath of that world noble. St. Charlos was atop a slave as they walked through the streets of Sabati with all the people bowing before him in fear and respect. He had been warned that Luffy and his crew were on the island and that the Navy's guidance was for him to leave immediately, but he could never be commanded as he was a noble of high status, his arrogance scoffing at that notion. After all, he would never think that an inferior being would stand against him, being a descendant of the creator of this world. So, he continued on his way, doing his things while enslaving people openly without anyone daring to speak against it. Chapter 268, Sabati Archipelago 04. Despite the arrival of the Straw Hats, life on the islands continued as usual, with people looking at the members of the super crew with various types of gazes due to their fame here, as they passed through certain places. At an auction house in the illegal area, a low-budget event was happening at this moment. Not all houses selling slaves could offer unique and sophisticated species. Here there were no exclusive breeds, only a few humans who rarely attracted attention from their buyers with low prices, but this was rare. Therefore, the house was not frequented by the more refined type of people, just some looking for some type of slave, being nobles from small countries to be able to buy second-hand slaves. "Our slaves are of great quality," the man leading the auction exclaimed into his Den Mushi to his audience, despite lying, because the row of slaves behind him was not very good, many skinny, as many men as women looking lifeless to the audience who saw them as a product. However, something happened at this moment. As the announcer began to announce the slaves with their prices, an explosion occurred in the wall, startling everyone immediately. Boom. AHH? What is this? An attack? Who dares? They screamed surprised, some thinking with superiority complex that they were important. In the midst of the smoke made with the destruction, 4 figures emerged, all wearing clothes to hide their identity with masks, but their hair was still visible. It was obvious that all were female figures. "Who are you?" the announcer spoke, frowning. "It doesn't matter. We're here to rob you," the woman with orange hair said simply. And, before the man could react, she raised her hand, generating a wind that threw the man away, and the people quickly began to become alarmed with their personal guards standing up to protect their masters, who tried to escape by going to the door at the back. However, the woman with blue hair made a hand movement, creating a wind vortex, stopping them from continuing to try to leave the place with the wind wall rising and them stopping in front of them after some guards collided and were thrown back. "What is this?" someone screamed. "Who are you?" A small noble was afraid of the women. "Are they devil fruit users?" They were worried, seeing that they were fruit users and quite powerful. Maid. A woman with curly hair commented. The other woman with black hair took a few steps while only nobles looked at her in fear. Her hands began to transform into machine guns. This is for the master and his punishments, she said with determination to herself. You better hand over all the jewels and money, otherwise, it won't end well for you. The woman who called the maid said with a fierce look while all the people were afraid and the slaves on the stage surprised by this development. Give me, give me. The woman with orange hair created claws, beginning to steal purses and jewels from all the members, while she began to play with the power of wind at her feet with excited eyes while no one could do anything against that. Something is happening inside. One of the guards outside heard the explosion and soon a constant sound of wind began to arise. They opened the door and saw a wind wall, making that no one could leave from there. Inside the place, Nami wanted to keep all the treasures in her pocket or make them magically sucked. Man, I wish I had Luffy's powers right now. I'm not sure if these bags will fit more gold. She didn't stop complaining. Well, we've taken everything from this floor, we still have the safe to break into. Alvida commented. Baby 5, can you keep them here? Vivi asked, and Baby 5 nodded her head while keeping her weapons pointed at everyone present. What are you doing? You can't do this. We are protected by underworld organizations, you don't know who you are messing with. One of the event organizers complained while seeing the girls approaching going towards the safe. Vivi simply raised her hand, and the man was thrown away by the wind. They proceeded to the lower part of the auction and reached the vault. Leave this to me, Alvida said, covering her hand and weapon with armament hockey. She launched herself and struck against the metal door of the vault as the metal exploded in a dented shape, flying over a pile of organized gold from the auction. More gold. Nami looked at it, fascinated, quickly passing Alvida who kept a small, satisfied smile and Vivi sighing. So much gold. But I can't just put it in my bag. She began to cry. I still wish I had Luffy's powers. Once again she complained. Despite the more fruit model, amplify human devil fruit having various possibilities, Nami only cared about the possibility of shrinking this treasure to fit more in her pocket during her heists. After putting all the treasures in bags, it didn't take long for them to return outside with bags on their shoulder filled with money, while Baby 5 was still holding everyone off. She had shot at some guards who tried to react, but now they were lying on the ground, proving they were not joking. How can this be happening? Someone cried. We're screwed. But these powers. They are from that crew, aren't they? People didn't take long to connect the 4 women to that group. After all, there were many reports of their fruits in the newspaper, which made them even more worried. After all, who could stop a group like them? We've finally arrived, Alvida said looking at all the still subdued audience. Let's let them go, we have everything, Nami announced. Vivi nodded and cancelled her wind vortex, allowing the nobles to finally be able to leave. Vivi turned her gaze to the slaves on the stage, looking at them with caution and lost. Baby 5, can you release them? Vivi asked with some pity. The maid nodded, her hand transformed into a chainsaw, cutting the shackles of the men and women there. After all, there were no explosive collars as it wasn't a very sophisticated auction. You can go wherever you want, Vivi commented as the slaves nodded gratefully, beginning to leave the place quickly. Let's go, Nami said, and they began to leave through the same hole they had opened in the wall. The nobles who were victims of these women began to run outside asking for help from someone for the theft of their belongings, even calling the navy, while the slaves tried to escape and the auction house itself tried to catch the slaves. This event soon began to spread. 4 women wearing clothes to hide their appearance had robbed the auction at that location. However, a moment later, other rumors began as Nami, Alvida, Vivi, and Baby 5, dressed, began to rob auction by auction, causing all the other houses to quickly arm themselves against what was happening in the lower houses from Tree 1 to 29. Even some houses were already preparing for this. They couldn't stop them as they continued to rob everything they could, with them going to the main houses. Hey, are you listening? There are 4 women robbing the auction houses. They say they are unbeatable and all are devil fruit users. A man commented in a bar with the news. What is this? Is it serious? But aren't auction houses and underworld smuggling? Even Joker himself is involved with some houses. They talked, not knowing what to think. I heard it might be the Straw Hat, they said. After all, the crew had many women and some with powers of wind and similar from the rumors. If it's them, who can stop them? Another exclaimed the obvious. While these rumors were happening on the city streets, at the naval base it was no different after receiving reports of recent activities. Captain, this is all we heard. It seems the Straw Hat is causing trouble while looting the auction houses. A sailor spoke reading the sheets to his officer. This is bad, they've just arrived in Sabidi and are already causing trouble. the Navy officer complained. He even had to defend the auction houses, even though there was slave selling. Despite being illegal, it was allowed here due to the big connections and because the Tenri Obitos liked to come here to acquire new slaves. If someone was attacking these houses, it would be quite bad and they had to act, but now with these people. While the sailors continued receiving complaints all the time with the 4 girls continuing the heists at the auction houses, the rest of the crew had no idea this was happening at the moment. Hugo, a bandaged Enel, and a dog continued walking through the streets not caring much about the looks people were throwing at them for recognizing them as the Straw Hats. However, this changed when someone stopped in front of them, preventing them from continuing their path. A large man stepped on the ground while making a certain noise with his arrival. Urge made Hugo and the others stop, while the captain of the worst generation with wings on his back, while holding a tree trunk on his shoulder. "Look what I found here. I was hoping to bump into some people who surpass my bounty," he said, keeping the smile on his face. "What? Look at this. Urge is challenging the Straw Hats." Someone shouted the obvious to the scene. "They are people above 200 million, even that dog is not something to be messed with." Another complained, "After all, Chouchou had a large bounty although the wanted posters just show a common white-haired dog and it was not a secret that he could become a Cerberus." "What do you want?" Hugo was the first to speak, not very friendly, while Chouchou and Enel remained silent not caring about this. "I heard you are pirates with bounties above 200 million. I would like to see your strength." He spoke arrogantly, hoping to have a battle against some members of the crew. "Just a mortal." Enel mocked. "Woof woof." Even Chouchou mocked, barking at this big man. Urge saw this, but before he could finish speaking, a punch filled his face ending his smile, with Hugo landing a big right jab, which sank into the man and, without being able to react, flew to the opposite side, hitting a bar and blowing up the whole structure while people ran out. "The Straw Hats are fighting," they exclaimed as people tried to escape from the demolishing bar. "That was easy," Hugo commented, seeing that the man had already been knocked out with his hockey and a bit of disdain. After all, he hadn't came to challenge them, but to fall like that with just one hockey punch. "Captain Urge!" His men shouted alarmed, going after the captain in the wreckage. A kilometer from there, in another place on that street, a man was playing cards sitting on a crate while his men continued behind him. "Captain, you were right." One of his members spoke, frowning. "Yes, I said there was a 95% chance of Urge being defeated easily. My cards never deceive," he said. This man was none other than Basil Hawkins, who still continued to see the chances with various questions for his guards. Enel, with his incredible observation hockey, heard this and became curious about the man at a distance. His body turned into lightning and he flew in that direction, while Hawkins still reading the cards, until he frowned and soon saw a bolt of lightning coming towards him. Chapter 269, Sabati Archipelago 05. Enel transformed into a bolt of lightning and sped towards Basil Hawkins. The man cautiously watched the approaching lightning as it morphed back into Enel, who stared intently at this peculiar figure reading tarot cards. "What?" Basil Hawkins' crew exclaimed as Enel suddenly appeared before them. Hawkins observed the uniquely dressed man, clad only in pants, with large ears and drums on his back. He seemed quite intrigued by him. "I heard what you said," Enel remarked, looking at him. "How may I assist you?" Hawkins asked, somewhat cautiously. After all, he didn't need to read the cards to know whether he could defeat this man or not. Being a Logia, no member of the infamous worst generation there could fight him, except for the Straw Hats who might actually beat him in a fight. "You can see possibilities?" Enel inquired, wanting answers from this mortal. "I can," Hawkins replied, seeing no reason to lie. "Then I want some information, mortal," he stated disdainfully. "The possibility of refusal is 10%. Hawkins stated, looking at his cards and disliking the situation. "What do you want to know?" In the end, he turned back to Enel. "I want to know what the possibility of me becoming a god is?" Enel asked immediately. After all, he was eager to regain his status. "A god?" many exclaimed upon hearing the question, but Hawkins started reading the cards. Seeing the answer to the question in the cards, he debated whether to tell the truth or not, but ultimately chose to. After all, he is a pirate. There's a 1% chance. Hawkins spoke, bracing for the Logia user's fury. 1%. Enel unexpectedly seemed thoughtful, not angry at the revelation. Suddenly, Chouchou appeared at the side. "Woof! Woof!" He was barking at Enel. "What do you want, mutt?" Enel grumbled at Chouchou, who growled back at Enel. They didn't seem to get along and were about to start a fight. Hawkins was worried about getting out of there before this conflict began. But Enel looked at the dog and had an idea. "Hey, tell me one more thing. What's the chance of this dog becoming a god?" he asked curiously. "Very slim as well, it's 2%. Hawkins said, though he seemed a bit surprised that a dog had such a chance of becoming something like that. This dog has a better chance than me? Enel was not pleased with this, especially since the stray dog had twice the chance he did. Are you sure about this? Enel asked Hawkins, looking at him seriously and wanting to really confirm it. Yes. Hawkins answered. Well, that doesn't matter, that 1% is all I needed. He said finally with conviction. It won't be a dog that becomes a god, nor even that demon, no one will stop me from becoming a god. He exclaimed as several lightning bolts began to appear around his body. What is he doing? This was scaring everyone nearby, as Chao started growling, ready to attack, but someone emerged first. Before Enel could react, a slap hit his head with an enormous hand, because the hand was wrapped with King's Haki, and it stopped him from continuing his lightning show. This guy is always trouble. Hugo commented, appearing behind and making Enel grimace in pain before fainting once more. He picked up an unconscious Enel and put him on his shoulder. Let's go, Chao, he said, and the dog barked. Woof. Woof. The dog barked, and they began to follow the path out of there. Sometimes I wonder why the captain put him in the crew, he always causes trouble. Hugo commented, and Chao couldn't help but agree with the bark. Anyway, let's see if we can find any celestial dragons around here. I want to hit one of them. Hugo said with an excited smile, and Chao couldn't help but think that this would be another problem. Hawkins just stayed silent as they left and sighed in the end. Meanwhile, on the north side of the archipelago, some crew members went straight there. Let's go. Usopp shouted while eating popcorn in the amusement park, and Chopper munched on cotton candy excitedly while Bappo followed behind with another sweet popcorn. Let us through. They joined a line as people looked at them, mostly with fear, since everyone there had bounties on their heads. It's the cotton candy lover, Chopper. We should run. A man in the roller coaster line exclaimed. You fool, his bounty is only 5 Baileys, not even worth the paper it's printed on. Why be scared of that animal? Another scoffed. None of them have very high bounties, so we don't need to be scared. Another one spoke up. Wait a minute, if we beat them, we could become very famous for it. Another had an idea. Man. This line is going to take forever. Bappo couldn't help but exclaim. Hey, you. Someone called out as they approached. Usopp turned to him, sensing his bad intentions through Haki. I heard you guys are straw hats. But you're all the weakest. None of your bounties even exceed 50 million. The man laughed, since neither Bappo nor Usopp had been part of an ice lobby, so their bounties hadn't changed. Sorry. Bappo said. Chopper didn't know what to say about that as he had cotton candy on his face. Why are you apologizing? Usopp shouted at Bappo. Ha ha ha. Look at these guys, they're still part of that crew? How pathetic. The men laughed at this. Chopper and Bappo seemed depressed by this, and before they could react, Usopp simply punched each of the two men. They didn't even have time to react as they flew from the force of Usopp's punch, and he raised a pistol and shot at the men with the power of light. The air then exploded with the men inside. The explosion caused chaos in the entire park as the lights shone, outshining even the sun's light among the large trees. Usopp, resting his pistol on his shoulder, was satisfied with what he had done and had no regrets. After all, Luffy had said they could hit anyone who tried to provoke them. The people who saw this were very scared, and the line quickly dispersed, no one wanting to mess with them anymore, since they were 3 members of that crew and Usopp showed they should not be messed with so easily. The men emerged from the light burned and fell unconscious on the ground. Usopp saw that the line was clear at that moment. Looks like it's our turn. Usopp said cheerfully, while Bappo and Chopper were still shocked by what had happened but simply decided to go along and follow the long-nosed marksman to the cart. They soon entered the place and began ascending the roller coaster, with just them, as no one wanted to share the carts with such dangerous people. They soon forgot what happened, giving way to the ride, and then they began to have fun as their cart swung from side to side with the thrill of the wind hitting, everyone screaming. Usopp, Chopper, and Bappo continued having fun on the roller coaster, while elsewhere, not inside the park but nearby, a large crowd of people gathered in front of a big stage, while some people performed music, with the audience listening intently, singing and dancing. The band continued their performance until it ended and the presenter spoke again. Now our next performance is a girl named Yuta, someone you might already know. This girl came directly from Elijah, the country of music. The man said as everyone shouted together. Yuta had registered at the site and provided some data, thus she entered the stage with everyone recognizing her as a member of the Straw Hats. People swapped their enthusiasm for caution the next moment, but Yuta was not shaken by this and began to sing her song. Soon she began to affect the crowd and everyone lost their fear, starting to dance along with her. Damn, she's really good. Scratchman Apu said, watching from afar as he moved his long arms. "I'm going to have to compete with her," he stated firmly. Meanwhile, in another location, in one of the southern parts of the archipelago. "Life is so good here," Nojiko commented as they sat facing the sea on a high spot, one of the penthouses of a hotel famous for hosting people with high purchasing power. Even celestial dragons visited the place. Foo, that's true." Robin also commented as she sat in the chair and adjusted her sunglasses, feeling the breeze, sipping on a milkshake. Kuina just nodded while sipping her strawberry milkshake, quite childlike. "It seems our girl is acting like one," Nojiko commented with a smile, as Robin also began to laugh and Kuina felt a bit embarrassed by it. All three women continued to enjoy the breeze at the hotel while, on the southernmost wall of the island, the Marines were starting to spread out, but suddenly there was an explosion near them as a bridge connecting the islands flew through the air, destroyed. "You damn!" They heard a female voice screaming angrily. It was Lami, who shouted angrily as Reiju appeared beside her trying to kick her. "Take this, you damn witch!" Reiju yelled back. Lami used her sword to parry the kick and another explosion occurred with the impact and stones began to fly as the ground started to crack and was destroyed by the impact of both women. "What is happening here?" The Marines began to scream with questions, seeing that very strange scene. Lami and Reiju continued fighting each other ever since they left the main group, moving from island to island, blowing up everything in their path. "It's them, the maniacs we heard about in the distress calls," a Marine exclaimed and began to run. Clearly, their destruction was affecting some of the citizens of the Sabati archipelago, as they began to receive many calls saying there were two crazy women fighting each other, devastating the streets, houses, and even trees being knocked down with their fight in the middle of the island. The situation was out of control. "Damn, we must stop them. Let's go," the Marines said. Then the group of Marines began to run after the women who were causing explosions as they ran across the islands, each impact they made against each other causing explosions. Chapter 270, Sabati Archipelago 06. On an island west of the archipelago, a man with green hair stood in front of the sea, gazing at a distant red mountain. It was none other than Roronoa Zoro, looking in that direction, deep in thought. "Damn, how can they get lost like that?" he grumbled, thinking his crew was following him, but they had somehow lost their way without him realizing. Ironically, it was he who had gotten lost. "Damn, I'm going to have to go back," Zoro commented, having no other choice but to return the way he had come. Meanwhile, elsewhere. "Amazing, how much does this model cost?" Yamato murmured, looking at men selling fish motorcycles with Ecchi by his side, who seemed a bit lost. The place was crowded as the man was renting out the fish. They recognized the straw hats, especially Yamato for being Kaido's daughter and having a bounty of 600 million. Some people were wary of Ecchi for being a fishman, but had to respect him. After all, he was part of an important crew. "Damn, if we could capture him." One man spoke while keeping his gaze on Ecchi, who might even have heard him. He wasn't hiding. After all, Luffy had said he would never need to do that again while under his flag and would destroy anyone who messed with him. "Are you an idiot? He's with Kaido's daughter. And you think we can mess with that group?" Another whispered to the first. "But did you see how much they offered for that mermaid they captured yesterday?" The first man spoke again and Ecchi immediately turned surprised towards those men. "But..." The man was going to continue, but suddenly felt a blade at his throat, catching everyone by surprise, as Ecchi had several swords drawn from their sheaths, placing his swords on the necks of 4 men at the same time, appearing in front of the man. "Nay. Tell me now," he said threateningly. "What were you saying?" Ecchi scared the men as soon as they realized their situation. "We only said that a mermaid was captured yesterday," one of the men said, swallowing hard. "Where is she?" Ecchi asked again. While Yamato was about to mount her bike, she noticed the strange situation. "Any problem, Ecchi?" she asked from afar. But Ecchi did not care to answer her, still looking at the man with the same deadly gaze. "Where is she being auctioned?" And he spoke, still holding the sword as if about to kill the man. "She's being auctioned at one of the most important auctions in the lawless area, the Joker auction." The man spoke with evident fear. "I believe I know where that auction is." Ecchi seemed thoughtful. Yamato approached at this moment. "Any problem?" He was wondering why Ecchi's hostility, as he hadn't even answered her. "Nay. There's a mermaid being auctioned and I need to stop it." Ecchi spoke fiercely. "A mermaid?" Yamato murmured, and immediately had a fierce look. "All right, let's solve this." She spoke, and the men looked somewhat surprised at that. "I wouldn't do that. I heard there will be 10 Ryobitos at the site. Are you guys crazy?" The man spoke immediately, making Ecchi frown. Meanwhile, Yamato didn't seem too concerned, just thoughtful. "It doesn't matter, let's go." She suddenly spoke and grabbed Ecchi by the clothes and threw him on top of her bike. She jumped a distance in front of the vehicle and Ecchi, a bit surprised by this, quickly asked. Hey, do you know how to ride this? Yamato just smiled and said. No, but let's try. She spoke, and before they could react, she accelerated and sped forward, while Ecchi screamed in fright, with her crashing into trees trying to keep the fish under control and leaving the place. She didn't even pay me. The man, responsible for renting the bikes, did not fail to shout after Yamato fleeing with the fish man. Meanwhile, in the lawless area, Luffy was with Shirahoshi at this moment, glued to his back. They walked from one side to the other, and it was obvious that he was attracting attention as many pointed at them. Look at him. He's wearing the straw hat. The people commented and quickly tried to keep their distance. It's him in person. Monkey D. Luffy. The pirate who is the son of the world's worst criminal and grandson of the marine hero, Garp. A rookie that not even the admirals alone can stop. As people exclaimed, trying to distance themselves, no one wanted to confront a pirate with a bounty of 10 billion Baileys. Luffy continued walking until he found a small bar and wanting to drink something, he headed to the establishment. I want to drink something, Luffy-sama. Shirahoshi pointed to the place, obviously where Luffy was already going. Yes, let's go, let's see what they have to offer. Luffy commented with a smile as he entered the place, which quickly grew gloomy with the presence of this pirate and a mermaid on his back. Luffy stepped on the floorboards as they creaked with the old wood, and the waiter saw that man and swallowed hard behind the counter, while the air grew tense, with no one able to breathe. He is here. Someone murmured. Stay quiet. If he hears you, you're dead. Another said to a friend. Please. Just go away. Nika-sama, make this man leave without causing death and destruction. Someone else was praying in a corner. Luffy approached the bar, while the man behind the counter looked pale. Luffy leaned forward and tapped the counter with a finger. Give me your best rum and an orange juice for her, he said, while the man quickly started making the drinks with trembling hands, afraid of displeasing this powerful pirate. Is he alright, Luffy-sama? Shirahoshi couldn't help but ask with her gentle eyes to the man who seemed to be having a convulsion, while trembling picking up the bottle. He's just nervous, Shira. Luffy said. He didn't care much about it, although he found it quite precipitous to be afraid in his way. After all, they think he would kill someone just for not liking his drink or something like that, but Luffy only kills someone when provoked enough for it, not over a glass of drink. The man brought their drinks and placed them on the counter while cautiously looking at Luffy. Even the entire place looked at Luffy expecting him to kill the bartender if he didn't like the drink. Hey, relax, I'm not going to kill you just because of your drink, Luffy said, as he tossed some gold coins to the man who quickly picked them up and nodded, but still looked cautious. Luffy didn't sit down and took the glass drinking calmly. The taste was not the best, but at least it was something he could drink peacefully. Luffy took Shira's juice and she drank it while still clinging to his back, swaying her tail, with an expression that seemed to love the orange juice. The place was relatively full, but no one else spoke at this moment while Luffy and his mermaid drank quietly at the bar counter. Then the door opened and a man looking straight at Luffy's back approached. Hey! Is he here after Monkey D. Luffy? People gossiped about this man in the bar. He can't be serious. Another commented. Luffy sipped his drink and smiled, feeling through his haki the person. Kid, I see you've been following me for a long time. Luffy commented, still with his back to the man. Kid did not respond to Luffy's comment. Is Captain Kid going to face Straw Hat, but his bounty is almost 3 times smaller than that of Captain Kid? Is he insane? I heard he is pretty crazy. Another spoke. Mugiwara will not let this go easily, he's a billion bounty pirate and of course he will kill just for provoking him. Another man grumbled. What do you want, kid? Luffy said. Can't you see I'm with my girl here? He said, and Shirahoshi seemed to blush at that, placing her hand on her face with a flush. Kid ignored the comments and looked at Luffy with a fierce gaze. I know I can't beat him now, he said, his hands clenching. But remember this, Straw Hat, that humiliation in Jaya will never happen again. Wait for me in the new world. I will defeat you, no matter how strong you are. I will dominate that sea, do you hear me, Straw Hat? Kid growled, and Luffy appreciated this challenge and began to laugh. Ha 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 ha. Luffy laughed loudly while the bar was silent. What are you laughing at? Kid didn't like that, thinking that Luffy was mocking him. Very well, kid, I'll be waiting for you then. After all, what fun is the sea when you don't have challenges to face? Luffy spoke seriously. After all, a long time ago, he could have killed Teach, but he kept him alive just so there would be people who could face him in the future. Luffy doesn't want to dominate the seas easily, he wants challenges and fights. Where's the achievement if you don't need to make efforts to reach it? Everyone was surprised by this, especially Kid. After all, no one expected such behavior from a pirate who was on top of everything on this island, showing that he was looking forward to a future challenge. Anyway, let's go, Luffy said as he finished his glass. Yes, let's visit other places, Luffy-sama, Shirahoshi said excitedly on his back. Luffy walked past Kid while the man kept his gaze on him, thoughtful about his last words. Luffy didn't care anymore and continued walking, heading out of the bar. Now let's go. Luffy was going to comment but soon noticed that there was a strange change happening on that street at the moment. All the people who had been circulating the area were now kneeling. What's happening, Luffy-sama? Shirahoshi looked confused, and Luffy simply glanced with narrow eyes to one side of the street. At the start of the street, there was a group of people in suits with a man in the middle, one who wasn't wearing a suit but a very peculiar white outfit that Luffy knew very well. After all, he had already killed two of those beings. How interesting. Luffy couldn't help but murmur then, as people knelt on the ground hoping not to receive the wrath of that Tenri Obito. They were surprised by someone simply walking through the place without kneeling. Hey, who is he? A woman spoke in shock, but when she saw the flag on his back, next to the mermaid clinging to him, she swallowed hard. Luffy walked towards the Tenri Obito and his forces while everyone still knelt, also amazed by Luffy simply walking, which would make anyone there a dead man, but Luffy seemed oblivious to it and everyone was wondering what he was about to do, while the Tenri Obito himself, on top of his slave, didn't even know the danger he was running at that exact moment. Chapter 271, Sabati Archipelago 07. St. Charlos was a world noble who treated everyone who was not a celestial dragon with disdain, inferior beings whom he could kill and enslave at will, and no one could do anything about it. Today, he was out in Sabati with his family, while his father and sister were somewhere else. He decided to look for some new concubines for his harem. He also liked to collect many different races, and today he was particularly excited because he had heard about the auction of a recently captured mermaid, which was happening in that very district. Immediately, he cancelled his trip to the amusement park and called his father, who would meet them soon at the auction, so St. Charlos continued to head to the big auction with his guards. He looked at his mount, a large man he had made into a slave some time ago, whom he used to ride while the man crawled wherever he wanted. The man hardly seemed to have any life left in his eyes, he just obeyed. Charlos was getting a bit frustrated with the delay this slave was having in continuing the path and quickly started kicking behind his head, stepping on the man's ear. Come on, you're too slow. That mermaid is going to be auctioned and I want to buy her. If you delay me and she's sold before I get there, I swear I'll make you regret it and make you beg for death, he said, growling as he continued to assault the man, who looked just like an empty puppet. Beside him was a pirate who had also just been bought at another auction. The man also looked at his miserable life, unable to react. After all, he had been caught by a celestial dragon and now had an explosive collar. Nothing could be done against that. The only thing he could think about was his future miserable life, which could not be better than the man this world noble was sitting on top of. Meanwhile, the men around him, in suits, who were government agents, calmly looked at the situation as if it were normal, already accustomed to St. Charlos's personality, doing nothing about it, just to keep him as one of the descendants of the creators of this world and protect him with their lives. If I hear right. So, there's a mermaid being auctioned right now. A voice emerged at that moment while Charlos was still venting his frustration on his slave. He impulsively ended up responding to the unexpectedly asked question. Yes, a mermaid is being auctioned, and I will have her in my tank. I'll make her try to run from my piranhas. It will be so much fun. The man said, imagining the scene, until suddenly, he blinked and looked forward, hearing that there was a man with a woman on his back standing in front of them. His gaze was stunned as he looked at that man with his mouth open, but it wasn't just him. All the people at the location looked stunned and at a loss for words. Luffy was there standing, not caring if he was in front of a celestial dragon. Luffy just calmly looked at the world noble while his arms were crossed. Hey, is this really happening? One of the citizens immediately shouted, while others also spoke. What's going to happen? Another murmured. Is this monkey D. Luffy? Does he not know that he can't mess with a celestial dragon? Others exclaimed. He's dead. Another said. Yes, he's messing with a god of this world. Charlos still looked at this whole moment at Luffy with a shocked look, as if he was simply going to pull out his gold gun and point it at Luffy and just kill him. You! St. Charlos murmured. While his group of agents was at the height of nervousness, wondering what Luffy was planning to do. What's wrong with him, Luffy-sama? Shirahoshi asked curiously. I don't know, he must be sick. Look at the snot coming out of his nose, that's why he wears the helmet, to not pass the virus to other people. Luffy murmured. St. Charlos seemed to have heard the most absurd thing in the world, because he didn't say anything else but to pick up his gold pistol and was about to aim at Luffy and shoot, but something at that moment caught his attention, which was the mermaid on Luffy's back. when he saw her tail swaying beside him, which left him even more surprised. "This is a mermaid," he said, seeing her pink tail and her curious gaze. "She's the most beautiful mermaid I've ever seen," he exclaimed, as more snot dripped from him. I want her now," he exclaimed joyfully while his men seemed to frown. Shirahoshi looked scared by his reaction. "Luffy-sama," she murmured, hiding behind Luffy. "You want her?" Luffy simply asked calmly, while everyone didn't know what to expect from the answer. Everyone knew the mermaid was part of his crew, so they felt that something terrible was about to happen at that moment. From a distance, a woman eating pizza stared open-mouthed at the scene. Hey, what is he going to do?" Bonnie asked, somewhat worried. Luffy's question took the celestial dragon out of his joy, and he looked at Luffy with a fierce gaze. "What are you doing standing, you inferior being?" he said to Luffy, who seemed not to care. "Why would I kneel to a celestial pig?" Luffy commented, making everyone gape at that moment with a grimace. Even St. Charlos himself was alarmed by it. He grabbed his pistol this time and pointed it at Luffy. "Take the mermaid off your back and I'll kill you," he said, not wanting to damage such precious merchandise. "Hey, celestial pig, did you know I usually kill people who think they can take my crew?" Luffy said, leaving people speechless once again. Killing a celestial dragon was something no one had ever thought to hear in their lives, so what Luffy was mentioning would defy the logic of this world. St. Charlos wasted no more time, immediately shooting at Luffy. Luffy saw the gold bullet coming out of his gun. It had sea stone in it, to kill devil fruit users as well, but Luffy just watched that marble moving in slow motion in the air and scoffed at it. St. Charlos didn't even realize when Luffy was already in front of him, cocking his arm back and delivering a punch. The man was imagining Luffy lying dead on the ground with him taking the mermaid to show off to his colleagues in Mary Joy's, while the glass of his helmet was breaking with Luffy's fist coming at him before anyone could react. The man only realized something was wrong when he felt pain with Luffy's fist burying into him, making even time stop with it. Everyone saw the scene freeze on that street, in a millisecond, while Luffy sank his fist into the face of St. Charlos, a being who is supposed to be untouchable. After all, touching a celestial dragon was like declaring war with the greatest power in this world, the world government. The scene had entered people's subconscious while it was recorded for the rest of their lives, until finally time returned to normal and before anyone could react. The celestial dragon simply flew backwards, crashing into one of the buildings on the street and exploding the building right after. The explosion made everyone look alarmed at that. Did he really do that? Someone spoke in the midst of the silence, with the only sound being the debris flying caused by the body of the celestial dragon. Everyone was shocked once again. "I can't believe this," another said, looking through it, stunned as well. He. Bonnie seemed to have a convulsion from a distance with that. Kid had a shocked face too in front of the bar as he watched the scene. The celestial dragon's guards were silent for a second, wondering what really happened, until the explosion began to settle down and they finally came out of their state of shock. "Do you know what you did? You touched a god of this world," one of those men said, and Luffy just shrugged. "Come on, call an admiral." "I don't care," he commented, and no one could argue against that. After all, this man had already fought two of them. Luffy was at a level where hitting a celestial dragon was something simple for him. He could not imagine those people knowing that he had already killed two of them, but that was a secret information because the world government covered up that there was someone with that kind of courage in the world. But what he did today was public and soon it would be in newspapers all over the world. Luffy looked at the men of the celestial dragons and simply unleashed his conqueror's haki, causing everyone to immediately fall to the ground. The place fell silent as the slaves, both the large man and the pirate captain, didn't know what to say about this man. "I remember them now. Once, one of them pointed a gun at my mother." Shirahoshi recalled the event that happened when she was just a child. It was then that she awakened her powers. She also commented calmly without caring about the gravity of the situation with Luffy hitting a celestial dragon. "Don't worry, Shira, I will never let a man touch you, even if I have to burn down all of Mary Joy's." Luffy spoke. His gaze returned to a frightened woman at a distance. "Bonnie. Let's have a talk with her, but for now," Luffy said, beginning to walk towards the slaves. The only one who reacted was the pirate captain with a look of fear towards Luffy, while the man who was used as a mount still had a lifeless look. Luffy simply grabbed their collars and activated them. "Hey, what are you doing?" the pirate captain shouted in fear. As the collar was about to explode, he removed them from their necks with haki and managed to make them explode meters away, as he threw them. The two slaves looked surprised at that, touching their necks. "You're free," Luffy said and began walking towards the destroyed building. The people, who had been quiet and fearful of everything that was happening, seemed to come out of their stupor with the explosions Luffy caused with the collars and they began to scream and run away. The entire place started to move away from that street as fast as possible, only the bravest still looking at Luffy, still shocked, because it meant one thing, that an admiral would soon land on Sabati, but they wondered what they would send when this pirate was someone who could handle one of them. Luffy went to the debris, lifted a stone, and found the celestial dragon quite injured, but still alive under that chaos. He picked him up by the hair and began to drag him out of the debris, heading towards Bonnie, who looked paralyzed at Luffy. "Hello, Bonnie." Luffy greeted her, approaching while Bonnie finally came out of her paralyzed state and looked at Luffy carrying the beaten celestial dragon like an animal. "What are you doing? Get that thing away from me and don't get close, otherwise they'll think I'm with you," she exclaimed furiously, while Luffy kept a smile. "This is going to be interesting," he murmured, approaching despite her protests. Chapter 272, Sabati Archipelago 08. While the girl was protesting for Luffy to get out of there, he was approaching as she stared at him with her mouth agape, between him and the unconscious Tenri Obito being dragged along, while the mermaid on Luffy's back just looked on with curious eyes. "Who is she, Luffy-sama?" she asked. "This is Bonnie, one of the pirates from the worst generation," Luffy commented. Bonnie growled at Luffy as he got closer. "What are you doing here? I told you to get this man out of here," she shouted again. It was a common reaction for anyone, after all, touching a Tenri Obito was practically declaring your own destruction. "Why are you so angry?" Luffy remarked, cleaning his ears. "Angry? Do you know what you've done?" She began to scream, stomping on the ground like a child. "Yes, I hit a Tenri Obito, it's very easy, you should try," Luffy commented. "As if I would do something so stupid," she shouted back at him, thinking Luffy was a clueless fool. Luffy just kept a tight smile. "Come on, don't be like that, I'm here to talk to you," Luffy spoke calmly. "Talk? An admiral is going to come here soon, and I don't want to get involved in this conflict." "You're crazy, you might fight one, but we're not all like you, we're not at that level yet, you idiot, idiot, idiot." She began to scream, kicking the ground. "She seems very angry, she's so funny," commented Shirahoshi, giggling quietly on his back. "Who's funny?" Bonnie growled at Shirahoshi. Luffy just shrugged, Bonnie reaching a point where she could no longer bear to talk with these crazy people and turned around to leave as quickly as possible. "I met your father a few days ago," Luffy suddenly said, and the girl immediately stopped, turning and looking at him with stunned eyes. "It was funny, I was beating up 7 warlords of the seas at that time. He showed up to stop me and we fought. I hit him a bit, and he really proved to be one of the most powerful 7 warlords of the seas," Luffy commented, still remembering that he didn't come close to beating him, but surely landed some punches that even dented his chin. A moment later, Luffy saw a hand grab his jacket near the neck as Bonnie stood close to him, looking at him seriously. "How do you know about that?" she demanded immediately. "Well, you could say I know a few things here and there, and more than that, I can help you." Luffy spoke unconcerned with the girl demanding answers in front of him. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, looking cautiously at this man. "I won't say everything right away, but I want you under my flag," he said with a smile, his will wanting her to join his main crew. "You think I would join you?" she snarled, finding the idea ludicrous. "I know you're just a child, Bonnie, that you use your fruit to transform your body into an adult and hide your age," Luffy spoke, making her fall silent. Luffy sighed before continuing. "I can help you, I can even help your father," he finally said, not wanting to waste time and getting straight to the point. "You can't be serious," she said, not believing him. "I can, we can help him at Egghead with Vegapunk. Kuma will undergo surgery soon and the rest of his humanities will disappear. There's nothing to do now, but in the future, I promise I can help you," Luffy spoke, keeping a serious tone with the girl. "What do you mean he's going to lose his humanity?" Bonnie seemed frightened by this. "He made a deal with the world government and it has to do with you," Luffy finally revealed. "Kuma sacrificed himself to save her." "No." Bonnie seemed about to cry with this. "I don't believe you," she spoke immediately, her life being full of lies and she not trusting people easily. "Luffy-sama." Shirahoshi seemed a bit surprised with this. Bonnie was so stunned she didn't even feel someone approaching and hugged her. She looked and saw the mermaid who was with Luffy appearing with a warm hug and gentle eyes. "It's okay. If you want to cry," Shirahoshi commented while maintaining a hug on the girl. Some tears fell from Bonnie at that moment, as the mermaid continued to hug the pizza-loving woman. Luffy nodded calmly while holding the unconscious and bleeding Tenri Obito in his hand, as people looked on from a distance, none daring to approach Luffy out of fear. "My father is really going to lose his humanity?" she asked Luffy, crying. "Yes," Luffy admitted. "But that doesn't mean you can't help him in the future." he said finally, as the girl seemed to be crying a lot at that moment. Luffy continued. If you want to know something, Bonnie, I know where Nika is. He said, now causing the girl to look up in surprise, still in tears, maintaining a stunned gaze at Luffy. How do you know that? She growled at Luffy, while Shirahoshi remained confused upon hearing the conversation and ended up returning to Luffy's back at that moment. How would I not know about Nika? Luffy commented more to himself than to her, his gaze returning to the girl and continuing. As I said, I know many things. He turned his attention to a confused Shirahoshi and smiled. You see this mermaid on my back? Luffy said. Me? Shirahoshi looked at Luffy, confused, waiting for what he would say about her. What about this mermaid? Bonnie asked, wiping her tears, but still the words about Nika seemed the only thing to her. She is an ancient weapon, one that possesses the power to destroy the entire world. He spoke calmly. He was already talking about Nika, mentioning the ancient weapon wouldn't make much difference now, and Luffy had made sure no one was listening to their conversation, especially about having a fallen Tenri Obito there. Bonnie grimaced at Luffy's assertion while Shirahoshi looked confused and pointed to herself. I can destroy the world? Shirahoshi asked, confused. You can, you're just not ready to control that power yet, but soon, the whole world will fear you. Luffy smiled at her. Despite not liking to refer to Shira as a weapon, he still couldn't lie about her heritage. He then turned back to Bonnie, who was grimacing at what she had heard. Anyway, I'd like you not to tell anyone about our conversation. And I believe I can help you in saving your father. You'll find all this under my flag, and if you have your own crew, there's no reason they shouldn't also get involved in the fleet I'm building. You know that the enemy is the world government, and it's a much more powerful enemy than the pirates of the New World. He said, pausing before continuing. You can't handle them alone. That's why, if you want a chance, join me. Just like I need strong companions I can trust with my life, you will also need strength and powerful allies, Bonnie. Luffy spoke as Bonnie seemed thoughtful about it. But Luffy wouldn't stay there much longer. After all, he had an auction to attend. Anyway, an admiral will come soon. So think about what I said and make your choice, join me or go your own way, but remember my words. Luffy spoke and began to withdraw while pulling the Tenri Obito by the hair again, looking like a beaten dog. Meanwhile, people were closing in, hiding, as Luffy passed through the street while people continued running. Bonnie watched Luffy walking away with his mermaid and the Tenri Obito, seeming to come out of her state of shock she had entered several times since Luffy started talking to her and turned around, kicking the ground. No. He was just lying all along. He can't be serious. It's too much information for someone to know about. Who was he? Anyway, I'm not going to trust a madman who hits a Tenri Obito like it's nothing. She said to herself and started to leave, heading in the opposite direction from Luffy. Meanwhile, the news of Luffy hitting a Tenri Obito so hard quickly spread through the marine channels, as such a significant event couldn't be kept quiet for long, even though all the agents with the Tenri Obito were still on the ground, knocked out by Luffy's haki. This is horrible. He hit a Tenri Obito. A uniformed man shouted in alarm, as everyone in the room quickly grimaced at what they heard. This can't be happening. Another said in a tone that indicated he was denying reality. To think that someone would raise their hands against the descendants of the creators of this world. This monkey D. Luffy is worse than we imagined. Another spoke. Notify headquarters immediately. They wasted no time and quickly passed this information forward, as this was already beyond what they could handle. Some time later. What? EDID what? Sengoku shouted from his office as loud as his lungs could muster, being heard throughout Maniford. Damn, why does Garp's grandson have to be such a nuisance? At a time when we need to focus our forces for an imminent battle, this bastard. And where is Kizaru who should already be on the island with his speed? Sengoku yelled as some officers in front of him shrank back. Sir Fleet Admiral. The man tried to speak. Spit it out. Sengoku was out of patience, making the man shrink even more. Admiral Kizaru took a warship. He said, stuttering with some fear. That damn it. Sengoku wasn't even bothering to censor his words against his allies, he just picked up his dendenmushi and made a call. A man in a yellow suit was enjoying the sun, lying on his beach chair while the ship continued sailing with some sailors managing the ship as he lay there enjoying himself and approaching the Sabati archipelago from a distance, but the island wasn't even in sight yet. Then his dendenmushi started ringing and he calmly saw that it was a call. Without hesitation, he answered, asking what Sengoku wanted. After all, he wanted to enjoy this time a little until he reached Sabati. Hello, hello. He spoke in his iconic way. Kizaru, you bastard. Sengoku began scolding him while the other shrank back, surprised by this, wondering what had happened to be scolded in such a way. A Tenri Obito was struck by Monkey D. Luffy in Sabati a short while ago. You were supposed to be on the island, what are you doing? Get there immediately. What? Kizaru immediately shouted, then, realizing the gravity, he quickly stood up while the sailors looked stunned. I'm heading out first, I'll meet you guys later. He said and simply disappeared, transforming into light and flying into the sky, heading towards Sabati. Chapter 273, Sabati Archipelago 09. While Luffy was causing chaos on one side of the lawless area, Hugo's group, Chaozu, and Enel were not too far away. Damned mortals. Enel grumbled. He was already conscious but was frustrated to have fallen so easily to a punch from the big man. Stop grumbling. Hugo couldn't help but comment to that fool. Woof. Woof. Chaozu agreed. TSK. Enel was still furious but chose not to respond to these two. People continued to avoid them until they finally noticed something odd, with people not moving away from them but all lying on the ground when they reached a certain area. This? Enel found it strange here. Hugo narrowed his eyes while Chaozu sniffed the air. Viewing the entire street as people lay on the ground, it seems the mortals here have recognized me. Enel, after some thought, commented, reaching his conclusion with an arrogant tone. Woof. Chaozu barked, calling him an idiot. It's not that, you fool. It seems one of them is here. Hugo spoke, his tone showing great hatred at this moment. A group soon appeared in the middle of the street, surrounded by government agents protecting the Tenri Obito in the middle of them, none other than the father of St. Charles, going to the auction to meet his family. He was not mounted on a slave, but there were slaves lifting a platform at each of its corners, while the man himself, in an astronaut suit, was sitting at the front of it. We are late. We must go faster. He exclaimed and grabbed a whip, hitting the backs of those men carrying it who could only feel the pain without complaint. They continued on their way but suddenly a lightning bolt fell in front of the group, startling everyone there and the kneeling people. What is this? The Tenri Obito immediately asked as his men were still frightened by it. The lightning began to disappear, and a man appeared among them, none other than Enel, looking at the Tenri Obito. Are you one of those who call themselves gods in this world? He asked disdainfully. St. Charles' father was stunned by this, while the slaves didn't know what to do at that moment. Who are you, you inferior being? The Tenri Obito shouted furiously at that. He is Enel, one of the Straw Hat members. One of the government agents spoke immediately. He has a logia. We must be careful. Another exclaimed in astonishment. Do you not know that you are in front of a Tenri Obito? Do you know the consequences of standing in front of one while you should be on the ground kneeling? Another member complained to Enel. Kneel? Enel asked with a dangerous tone. He began to release lightning while the Tenri Obito looked surprised at this and his men afraid. Hey, is he going to attack a Tenri Obito? One of the kneeling people couldn't help but exclaim, seeing that. Now you will feel the power of a true god, not a false one. Enel spoke as he prepared to attack the Tenri Obito, who looked at him with fear at that moment. What do you plan to do? The Tenri Obito sensed the danger and exclaimed without his previous arrogance. However, just as Enel was about to unleash his power to attack the man on the platform without caring to launch a direct attack at point-blank range, before he could attack, Hugo once again struck him, hitting him on the head. Enel, still hurt, couldn't react despite seeing the blow coming, so he fell to the ground there once again. He attacked his own companion? One of the kneeling men spoke in astonishment. He fell. The Tenri Obito himself sighed, and even though they were inferior beings, he had to feel grateful for that, as clearly that man had wanted to attack him. Quick! Grab the collar and restrain him, I will make him beg and regret challenging me. The Tenri Obito shouted and looked at Hugo. You, restrain him. The Tenri Obito ordered without caring to thank for the help. After all, he believed that was the duty of all beings in this world who were not from Mary Joyce. You won't need that. Hugo spoke, looking at the man. What do you mean by that? He was about to demand, but soon saw that man on top of him before anyone could react. I just hit him so that he wouldn't touch you before me. Hugo spoke and drove a punch into the man's face, breaking the platform and exploding the ground beneath it. Boom. The explosion was so large that all the slaves and government agents were blown away by the shockwave. He hit the Tenri Obito. People immediately began to scream in fear. Meanwhile, among all the debris, Hugo stood there and saw a man in a state similar to what his son would be after Luffy hit him. I guess I hit him a bit, he murmured, thinking it was too little. Without wasting time, he raised his leg and kicked the unconscious and bleeding man in the chest, really sending him flying. Well, let's follow him, he murmured and turned his attention back. Chaozu, grab Enel and let's follow that flying object. Chaozu barked in confirmation while still urinating on the ring pants. He went to the clean side of the clothing and bit, pulling the unconscious god, and started to follow Hugo. They quickly advanced against the Tenri Obito falling in the distance. On the other side, Bonnie was walking while heavily stomping on the ground, frustrated. She didn't know why she was doing this, but at that moment she was following the man who was carrying the Tenri Obito through the streets. She didn't know when, but at some point, she just started to follow him after turning around. After thinking about everything she heard, she could not ignore after hearing all that. I'm going to regret this, I'm going to regret this, this pirate is going to screw me over. She began to speak, but still continued towards Luffy. How dare he say those things to me? She was growling with so much anger. Bonnie-sama is following us. Shirahoshi looked back while seeing Bonnie following at some distance. Are you going to keep grumbling the whole time? Luffy asked after hearing Shirahoshi, clearly hearing the girl in the body of a woman speaking angrily. Shirahoshi began to laugh. It seems like she is taken a liking to you, Luffy-sama. Shirahoshi commented with a giggle. Who's taken a liking to whom? Bonnie shouted furiously. Luffy shrugged as they continued on to the auction without caring about that woman. Some time later, at the auction itself where there was a drawing of Joker from the underworld. The big event had already begun. Various nobles from all over the world were gathered there, waiting for the event to start, as there was a rumor of a mermaid to be auctioned off that afternoon. Everyone eagerly awaited the event, while slaves continued to come on stage and people placed bids, wanting to buy, and more importantly, there were 2 Tenri Obitos present. Where are Daddy, brother, and his friend? The woman dressed in an astronaut suit murmured, dissatisfied, as they were all late. They were a single group of 5 Tenri Obitos who came to Sabiti at this time, which was her fiancé, her father, brother, St. Charles, and a friend of his to buy new slaves and take them to their mansions in Mary Joyce. They'll come soon, let's enjoy and buy all their slaves. The Tenri Obito who was her fiancé commented with a smile. You're right, darling. She spoke passionately. As people tried not to make eye contact with them, since anything like that could mean death for them, the auction continued. It was after several slaves were auctioned off that the main event finally emerged. And now, we will present our most valuable asset, a mermaid directly from the sea, captured by one of our hunters on the island's edge. The man shouted, as everyone screamed excitedly. There is the mermaid. They watched enthusiastically as the large glass aquarium appeared on stage, and the short green-haired mermaid, who was none other than Kami, who had been captured yesterday. She looked around fearfully as she was placed with an explosive collar around her neck and kept in the aquarium unable to break it. Let's start the bidding. The presenter began. 50 million. Shouted one of the nobles. Bidding starts at 50 million Baileys. The presenter shouted with enthusiasm. 100 million. Another exclaimed, doubling the amount of the first. We have 100 million. Anyone else? The presenter shouted. I bid 150 million. A third spoke. 170 million. 200 million. A man wearing a crown exclaimed. 200 million? Are you crazy? You'll spend the entire national treasury on a mermaid. One of the ministers spoke up and asked his king not to be so reckless in spending so much money. Haha, look, it's a mermaid. I will have her in my tank and she will be displayed to all the nobles at the palace to show my status. That king said, pleased with the idea of having such a luxury article. But suddenly, someone raised their hands, and it was none other than a Tenri Obito, beside his fiancée. 500 million. He exclaimed, leaving everyone stunned with that. 500 million? Even the auction presenter couldn't believe what he heard. Are you buying a mermaid? His fiancée asked beside him. No, of course not. I'm getting her for your brother. If he's willing to pay 500 million for her, then I will keep her. He spoke with a smile, and his fiancée nodded. No one else spoke. After all, no one could contend with the authority of a Tenri Obito. I'll give you 1, I'll give you 2, I'll give you 3. The presenter was about to finalize this item when suddenly, time seemed to stop. Suddenly, the entrance door began to crack, a gap started appearing on its side. In one corner of the auction, the walls began to crack, another wall began to crumble on the opposite side. In the ceiling, another crack occurred as it began to collapse. 5 explosions occurred at the same time at this moment, exploding on all sides at once, leaving everyone scared at that moment. Boom. 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 Chapter 274, Sabati Archipelago 10. All sides began to explode, starting with the door. What's this? The people inside immediately exclaimed with this disturbance. An enemy attack? Don't they know there's a celestial dragon in here? Another person exclaimed incredulously. The door finally broke with the smoke and Luffy emerged from it with his mermaid on his back and still dragging the celestial dragon by the hair. Bonnie wasn't far behind as she entered with him. An explosion occurred on the side of that wall and a celestial dragon emerged from there with Zoro appearing. What an annoying guy. I had to hit him. He complained while looking at the man who appeared out of nowhere in front of him and asked him to kneel, so Zoro simply hit him and brought him here and appeared by chance at this auction. Those are celestial dragons. The nobles practically went pale, seeing a celestial dragon fallen on the ground in front of Zoro, and Luffy dragging the other by the hair while he was unconscious at the entrance of the place. No, this can't be happening. Members from various countries quickly shouted, while the presenter, in front of the poor man, turned so pale. Not just from the fright, but from who had caused harm to them. After all, Monkey D. Luffy was there. What could they do to stop a pirate of 1 billion Baileys? Brother! The female celestial dragon immediately exclaimed. This! You dare touch the gods of this world? Her fiancé exclaimed angrily, clearly wanting to kill Luffy and Zoro, but not before making him suffer for such a thing. However, his voice was soon muffled by the auction screams, as another wall exploded, revealing more destroyed interior, with Hugo emerging right after the destruction while holding another celestial dragon by the neck. I finally caught up. Hugo commented satisfied while holding the man with a sadistic look. They had destroyed his life a long time ago. This was a chance to avenge these beings. Daddy. The celestial dragon complained again, dazed seeing that, not just her brother, but her father looking beaten while blood was dripping all over his face with his helmet all destroyed. How dare you do something like this? I will kill you, but before I will take all of you to Mary Joyce and torture you for such affront. Call the Navy immediately. The fiancé immediately shouted. He didn't even know who these pirates were and didn't care. This celestial dragon couldn't believe that something would happen to him, so he wanted to catch them immediately in his peak of hatred against the inferior beings who hurt his peers. However, a crack began to appear in the ceiling at that exact moment. Immediately, another explosion followed, with a huge fish emerging from there and immediately flying downward, while the celestial dragons themselves were the landing spot and could not react while being crushed by it, destroying all the benches around with people becoming even more alarmed. There was a woman piloting that fish and it was none other than Yamato smiling on that creature and Ecchi a little away from her, right behind on the back. We've arrived. Yamato celebrated, knowing she had arrived at the location after getting the information with Ecchi. That's true. Ecchi commented, while looking at the mermaid on the stage, but his gaze returned downward and he went completely blank when he saw that Yamato, piloting it in that way, ended up crushing world nobles in the process. Nay. What did you do? Ecchi couldn't help but yell with a grimace. However, his voice once again was muffled with an explosion coming from the other side of the wall. Boom. The wall broke and figures began to emerge from there, being 4 women with masks. We've finally arrived. Nami shouted excitedly. The master is here. Someone seemed quite happy too amid all that dust. She wore maid clothes and was none other than Baby 5. How do you know? Vivi asked. I can smell him. Baby 5 spoke proudly. That's true, I can also smell the scent of my husband. Alvida agreed beside her. What a weird way for you two to find Luffy. Nami and Vivi shouted at the same time. Soon, the 4 women who had robbed at least 30 auction houses in this area arrived at this location after hearing about a big event happening here. Then they came to make big money from the audience and the auction houses safe. So, Nami took a step forward and shouted. We are robbing all of you. She demanded and looked at the people a bit surprised. Since nobody cared about them while they kept their eyes on just 4 points in the room. It seems they didn't even notice us. Vivi murmured. It must be because of that. Alvida was already pointing. One finger pointed to Yamato, who was still happy to have arrived, while Ecchi was quite worried. Meanwhile, there were 2 celestial dragons below them, fallen and injured. The second time she pointed was to the opposite side. There was Hugo holding another injured and unconscious celestial dragon by the neck. There was Enel being dragged by Chouchou as he was pulled by his clothes into the auction. Alvida pointed for the 3rd time to Zoro, who was near the entrance scratching his head while looking at the celestial dragon fallen on the ground. And her last pointing was to Luffy who was at the entrance, with it destroyed, grabbing another celestial dragon by the hair while dragging him. This is why nobody cared about us breaking into the place. Alvida spoke calmly. Since everyone at that auction kept their eyes wide and mouths open at all those surreal scenes happening around them. After all, who could imagine that in a place in this world, 5 beaten celestial dragons would appear? The mermaid on the auction stage seemed oblivious and quite confused about what was happening. However, below them, where the other slaves were kept before being auctioned, an old man seemed to open his eyes at this moment, having a quite wide-eyed look. What were all those explosions? A giant next to him looked up, wondering, while the old man stayed there with eyes quite surprised by what he was feeling with his observation hockey. Then, he began to laugh. It seems quite interesting things are happening. He had to admit. What do you mean by that, old man? The giant asked the elder, not understanding his words. Never mind now, let's get out of here. The old man announced, and the giant, with only one eye on him, as if this elder was a madman. Back to the auction, everyone still remained in their daze. They attacked the celestial dragons, all of them. This thought was in the witnesses' heads. Nobody could believe what was happening, nor could they even breathe with that. But the first to react were their own girls from the group as they kept their masks to hide their identities. "What are you doing?" Nami immediately jumped, using instant transmission, and appeared in front of Luffy, grabbing him and starting to cry to her husband. "How could you attack all the celestial dragons?" She began to scream. "Why did you do something so stupid? Don't you know we are doomed now? The Navy will send the 3 admirals." "Ah, finally found you, thought you guys had gotten lost," Zoro commented, seeing Luffy and Nami grabbing him at this moment. "Do you have the nerve to say something like that?" Nami immediately shouted at him. "You also attacked one of them." She began to complain while crying. "Ah, found you." Hugo spoke with a small smile. "Ended up running into one of these things, you too, from what I see," he said with satisfaction. "Guys, I'm here too," Yamato shouted, seeing them waving her hands. "You guys caught these white-dressed guys, how funny," she said, laughing. "Why is this happening?" Nami began to cry more while kneeling on the ground, pounding her fist there, and even Vivi joined her, while Alvida appeared to Luffy. "Hello, husband," she announced with a seductive tone. "Master," Baby Fives shouted excitedly beside her. Alvida turned to look at the pink-haired girl behind Luffy, and it wasn't Shira Hoshi. "Did you get another woman?" she questioned, looking at Luffy. "Who was his woman?" Bonnie immediately exclaimed. Luffy looked at his wife. "No," he denied. "I don't mess with brats." He spoke calmly. "Who's the brat?" Bonnie slammed the ground hard and asked angrily. At that moment, all the nobles snapped out of their daze and quickly began to run, realizing the gravity of the situation. They trampled over everything, shouting, "We need to get out of here fast, this place is going to be destroyed soon. The world government will never let this slide. We don't want to get involved in this." They complained as they started to withdraw, bypassing the straw hats, heading for the holes they themselves had created. The place soon emptied, leaving only a few guards dressed as knights and the presenter, who still looked stunned. "Well, it looks like we still have some company," Luffy commented, looking at all the soldiers. But suddenly, a conqueror's haki emanated from somewhere that wasn't any of them, causing the soldiers to feel the wave of power, and they all collapsed unconscious soon after. Everyone with good observation haki looked on in shock, except for Luffy, knowing it wasn't any of them who had caused this power. Those less proficient thought it was Luffy or Zoro who had a more developed conqueror's haki. Haki immediately jumped off the fish and went to the aquarium on the stage at that moment. Haki. Kami was surprised when she recognized him, as was Haki. After all, he did not know that it was exactly her who had been captured. "How were you captured like this? I always told you to be careful," Haki shouted. It had been years since he last saw the mermaid since he left the Fishman Island with Arlong. The girl was just a little girl then, but he recognized her after all these years. Behind Kami, a red starfish emerged. Haki. It was pretending to stay still on the back of the mermaid to avoid drawing attention, trying to get out of that situation. He was excited, seeing that they finally began to have a chance to escape that nightmare. "It's been a long time since I last saw you, Haki." A voice emerged from behind the stage as an elderly man began to walk. "Really?" Haki immediately shouted in surprise as he saw the man approaching calmly. Really smiled at him, then his gaze returned to the now empty venue, while the audience had fled and the soldiers lay fallen. Only the straw hats were there, along with their victims. Really looked at each of them a bit surprised, seeing them knocking down several celestial dragons, something that had never happened before, at least no record or any knowledge of it. Then, to see 5 of them downed at once was quite strange. His gaze returned to the straw-hatted man at the entrance, still surrounded by women carrying St. Charlos, with 2 women crying at his feet, with a mermaid glued to his back, 2 women in front of him, and a last one, a bit distant behind him, who looked quite angry at him. The one who used Conqueror's haki. It was him. Zoro immediately realized, looking sharply as he held his sword, understanding that this old man was no ordinary person and could be a threat. As Luffy always said, anyone who possesses the Conqueror's haki should not be underestimated. His gaze was still on Luffy and really cracked a small smile. "Finally, you are here, Monkey D. Luffy. You have always been someone I wanted to meet," Really declared, while Luffy also kept his gaze fixed on him. "Really, the second mate of Rogers, I have always wanted to meet you too." He spoke amidst all that silence. Chapter 275, Sabati Archipelago 11. In Mary Jo eyes. "We cannot let this continue," exclaimed one of the elders, Jaga Ursha Saturn, angrily. He touched a Tenri Obito publicly. We cannot just let it go. We must free the Tenri Obitos from his grasp. Another of the 5 men in the room of power, Marcus Mars, spoke. Should we send our forces? Topman Warcurry suggested. We can, but we certainly cannot send all our forces. Ethan Burn Venus Jiro reasoned. Yes, we must keep a force to protect the Holy Land. We know how dangerous they can be. A 5th elder, Shepherd Jupiter, said at last. They could handle this, but rarely did they get involved, preferring to stay behind the scenes while sending their forces to act on behalf of the 5 elders. Then call Kong. Let's send him. An elder spoke and everyone nodded. Meanwhile, a man in front of a huge aquarium was reading some reports when his dendenmushi rang. How may I assist you? Kong asked as soon as he saw it was from the room of power. We need you to go to Sabati. It's happened. Kong heard the 5 elders somewhat surprised by this and quickly nodded. I understand, I will be heading down the red line immediately. He said and quickly stood up and put on a black jacket with the government symbol as his current rank. He kept his heavy steps as he opened the door and left the room. Mr. Kong, any problems? His secretary looked a bit surprised to see him leave like that and asked, while Kong maintained a serious expression, walking down the hallway. He just looked at her and exchanged a few words. I will be out for a while, don't wait for me, cancel all meetings this afternoon and tell anyone who comes to see me that I am busy with something important. He spoke and the woman nodded, still surprised, as she had never seen her boss act like this. Kong was one of the big names of the world government. As a former fleet admiral who commanded the navy at the time Rox and Roger dominated the sea, he had enough experience and power to act in any sector of the world government. Then after retiring and handing over the position to Sengoku, coming to the Holy City acting as the chief government agent, where he had control of almost everything, even the CPs were commanded by him, losing authority only to the Holy Knights, this because they were Tenri Obitos and the own elders, who had to obey them, regardless of the circumstances. He had been inactive for years, but knew it was necessary at this moment. After all, the Navy was in a delicate moment with the possible war against Whitebeard. Not being able to send sufficient forces and, after the threat of the meteor that he later found out had been caused by Monkey D. Luffy himself, they certainly also could not send the largest forces from Mary Jo Eyes, which they decided to leave here to protect the city and the Tenri Obitos. Khan quickly left for the streets of the Holy City. While there were many government agents circulating and working in that district, which acted as the city's force, created after Tiger Fisher launched an attack many years ago. So you're causing trouble again. Grandson of Garp. Let's see if you're really all that. He sighed, then flexed his knees and simply jumped up at a surreal speed, flying and gaining altitude in the city, starting to head to the west side of the Grand Line, where Paradise and Sabati were located. As Kong began to jump through the air using moonwalk and descending at full speed down, at the auction house where all the confusion in Sabati was happening, a silence took over the place after Luffy declared that this man was the legendary Rayleigh, being the second in command of the Pirate King's ship, Ora Jackson. So, he is the one you mentioned, Captain. Zoro was surprised, but soon understood. After all, a man like him certainly had a conqueror's haki accompanying him. This old man is the vice captain of that Pirate King? Yamato murmured, descending from his fish, which was also knocked out from the fall. As for the man in question, he just stood there looking at the people staring at him with Luffy's words. Seems like you know me. Rayleigh has a small smile for Luffy, who nodded. Of course. Luffy said mysteriously, but he wouldn't say why. We are here and I would love to talk, but it seems we cannot talk. He said calmly. Yes, it looks like he is coming. Luffy agreed. Who is coming? Vivi asked, but before anyone could answer, Yamato and Zoro looked serious, being those with the most developed observation haki there. At that moment, one of the walls exploded as some of them exclaimed, and a shadow emerged, with a man in the white cloak of the Navy with the justice symbol swaying as he showed himself from the hole. So many people, how frightening. Kizaru said as he approached calmly, looking through his iconic glasses and studying all his potential opponents. So they sent you. Luffy commented, looking at the man who was taller than him, but calmly. Monkey D. Luffy, you not only assaulted a Tenri Obito, but your entire crew also injured 5 in total. He said, looking at each corner, seeing the world nobles fallen. You see, they make me proud. Luffy said with satisfaction. That's no reason for you to be happy. Nami shouted at Luffy, as she was terrified by this. Anyway, since you're here, do you want to fight inside or outside? Luffy spoke as if it were something normal. After all, it was inevitable. I'd prefer to fight outside. Kizaru had to admit, as he understood what was happening there. But I would like you not to hurt the New Worlders anymore. He spoke, even a bit more politely than usual. All right. Luffy nodded, He had already beaten enough on those things and then dropped St. Charlos on the ground. Zoro would already have his fallen friend in front of him, so he didn't need to do anything. Hugo simply threw a father of St. Charlos on the ground as well. Are you going to fight like this? Rayleigh couldn't help but comment while raising an eyebrow at Luffy, going to fight an admiral as if drinking with a friend. I like to fight an admiral once in a while, Luffy said with a smile. Silver Rayleigh. How frightening, this is really getting harder for me. Kizaru commented as soon as he noticed Rayleigh and recognized him. Don't worry. It will just be me and you. Luffy spoke and turned back to the man. You can help this mermaid while I deal with Kizaru outside. Leave this to me and my crew, after all, we were the ones who made this mess. He spoke in a serious tone, after all, he didn't need help from someone who had nothing to do with this. Luffy-sama? Shirahoshi was a bit confused by Luffy. You stay here, Shira. Luffy said and started to turn around, while Kizaru followed him past a cautious Zoro, but did nothing more than accompany Luffy outside calmly. Luffy stopped next to Bonnie, who looked cautiously at Kizaru. If Luffy remembered, they knew each other. But setting that aside, Luffy picked up Shirahoshi from his back. Take her, look after her for me, he said, and Bonnie was a bit lost there, while Shirahoshi went for a hug from the other woman a bit confused. Should we intervene? Vivi asked worriedly next to her. No. Let Luffy fight, Yamato commented. Meanwhile, Rayleigh looked at the backs of the two with some admiration. It seemed that the boy was more fearless than he imagined. Giving a small smile, his attention returned to the collar of the mermaid next to Ecchi. Let me see that. He approached and grabbed the collar, which immediately started to avoid exploding. Isn't this bad? Nami asked worriedly. It's under control, Rayleigh said and suddenly removed the chain with his haki and moved it back, throwing it aside as it exploded. Incredible. Bonnie was stunned by that. That was the same thing Luffy-sama had done. Shirahoshi commented. Luffy continued outside and Kizaru accompanied him as they simply walked as if they weren't about to start a fight. Meanwhile, outside, yes, dozens of Navy soldiers stood, pointing their guns at the destroyed spots of the auction. It's him. They shouted as soon as they saw Luffy coming out, immediately pointing their guns at him. Release the Tenri Obito unless you want to die. One of them shouted as Luffy snorted at that. The sailors were surprised that Admiral Kizaru emerged next to Luffy, walking out side by side. Look, it's Admiral Kizaru. The way they are walking. Has the Admiral captured him? Someone asked hopefully. I doubt it, the pirate isn't wearing sea stone handcuffs. An officer analyzed carefully. Damn, what does this mean? Another exclaimed. Luffy walked to the middle of the area while the sailors were a bit lost on what to do. Kizaru approached and looked at the sailors. Could you give us a moment, please? And the sailors were confused by this. What do you mean by that, Admiral Kizaru? They asked. We are going to fight. If you don't want to die in a crossfire, it's best to move as far away as possible, Luffy suggested, leaving everyone shocked. TSK. You heard him, get out of here. An officer at the end spoke seeing that Kizaru did not seem to deny Luffy's words. Alright, let's get back to our rematch from Inai's lobby. Luffy spoke calmly. Kizaru did not respond and simply disappeared, reappearing next to Luffy with a flash of light. Have you ever taken a light-speed kick? He asked calmly as time seemed to slow down and he moved closer to Luffy's face with his attack. You know I have, you should use a different line for that attack, Luffy commented calmly. Kizaru frowned with Luffy messing up his performance and then launched his kick while his leg was glowing. The impact was immediate, on Luffy's face, generating a collision force with wind while the ground began to crack at that moment and the terrain sank. Boom. Despite the destruction from his kick, Kizaru was surprised that Luffy didn't even move, while maintaining his face slightly turned due to the impact. He removed his foot and Luffy touched his jaw. That was a nice kick, Luffy commented calmly while spitting out some blood from the damage he suffered, but maintained a calm look at Kizaru. However, you'll have to do better than that now, Luffy said as he faced the Admiral, ready to fight for real. Chapter 276, Sabati Archipelago 12. The Admiral Kizaru is already on the island. A pirate pointed in the distance, as Luffy and Kizaru stood facing each other in that space, after the Admiral's first move. The pirates in the area started to run quickly, not wanting to get involved with the high level of the Navy and a fight against a pirate with $1 billion on his head. Kid was also nearby and was frustrated as well, as this reminded him once again why they were on a level below the pirate. Damn. I will reach this level one day, he growled in the distance. Others, like Budge, looked at the fight with a serious gaze. I think we should get out of here, he murmured to his men. As he began to leave the area, he encountered another colleague from the worst generation as he watched the man playing some cards. Budge approached, while the man didn't even look at him. Capone Budge. What are you doing here when we're in a situation involving an admiral fighting 2 kilometers from us? Basil Hawkins asked, looking at the cards. Those pirates. The Straw Hat and his crew. People started shouting that they beat 5-10 Riobitos. This is surreal, and now there's an admiral on that side. Bidge spoke angrily and continued. Tell me, if that pirate loses to the admiral, will he come after us? What are the chances of Luffy losing this fight? He asked the man. Basil Hawkins heard his question and nodded with a man's reasoning and turned his attention back to the cards as he began to play. 30%. He spoke. What? That's the chance of defeat? Bidge was surprised by that. Yes. Luffy has a 30% chance of defeat, which gives him a 70% chance of beating an admiral. Hawkins spoke calmly, but with a furrowed brow at the same time. Are you saying he has a better chance of beating him? Bidge couldn't believe it. After all, even though he had seen in the newspaper that Luffy fought against 2 admirals, it was still hard to believe that he could win one, especially with this margin of chance. Bidge was not satisfied with that and asked another thing. What's the chance of me beating that admiral? He asked, while Hawkins, just to himself, without needing to look at the cards. 0%. He said. You must be joking with me. He growled and saw that it was no use arguing and began to leave. Let's go, men. He said, and his group began to head for the port. At the entrance of the auction, more people began to come out onto the street from the place, while Bonnie herself had no choice but to follow them. Luffy seems like he's going to fight. Yamato commented, seeing Luffy facing Kizaru on the destroyed ground. It seems this is just the captain's fight. We should withdraw. Zoro commented, and the others nodded. They started to circle around the side of the auction while the crew looked at Luffy. One of them was Rayleigh, who had a sparkle in his eye seeing Luffy, a rookie, facing one of the Navy's greatest forces calmly. Ecchi was by his side while he brought Kami. Look, the Straw Hat pirates are running, we shouldn't let them escape. The sailor noticed this and began to shout in the distance, let's capture them for justice. They quickly began to chase after them. Let's go. Nami shouted as some Navy shots began to be fired at them. These bastards. Baby 5 pointed her hand, transformed into a machine gun, and began shooting, leaving the Marines having to protect themselves from the woman. As she ran, Kami, clinging to the back of Ecchi, along with her starfish on her back, who had introduced himself as Popag, saw the mermaid on Bonnie's back with curious eyes. I don't remember seeing you on Fishman Island. She said immediately, even in a situation apparently bad for them. Shirahoshi on Bonnie's back, who was frustrated being in such a bad situation, looked at the green-haired mermaid with kind eyes. What is your name? She asked curiously. I also don't remember seeing her at the palace, or, moreover, it's been a long time since I saw a mermaid. She thought, looking at the other tail friend, being a bit excited to see someone of her species after a while. I'm Kami. She introduced herself. I am Shirahoshi, son of Neptune. Shirahoshi commented with a gentle smile. Son of Neptune, like the princess from our island? Kami asked innocently. What? Popag shouted when he heard this and immediately spoke to Ecchi. Tell me this is some kind of joke, Ecchi. He exclaimed. Nay. It's true, she is Shirahoshi-sama. Ecchi spoke. Popag went blank, as if his spirit was leaving his body, and Kami looked on curiously, until she realized who was in front of her with a grimace, opening her mouth wider than the laws of physics would allow with wide eyes. She immediately screamed. What? She is a princess of the kingdom? Her voice was soon muffled as an explosion erupted behind them, sending a crack of wind past them. What is this? Vivi asked, shielding herself from the wind. They've started. Yamato commented as they moved away. At a distance, Kizaru and Luffy exchanged a blow at this moment, their fists enveloped in armament haki, striking each other and generating black lightning of haki. The real force made the whole place within a 50 meters diameter explode, and quickly explosions started to happen again as they exchanged more blows. Just using haki, they began to hit each other at high speed with no one able to follow, only seeing explosions arising all over the area. Boom. 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 We should get out of here, said one of the Marines, as many ran after the Straw Hat group, some remained in place. They quickly felt the weight of the battle even though they were 200 meters away from the battle. He's fighting against the Admiral. Another Marine spoke, although it was in the newspaper, it was still surreal for many to see this live in front of them. The two figures began to run through the air, emerging from the ground explosions and continuing in the space above them. As they continued to fight each other, they looked like lines running in a fight towards each other, hitting and generating impact explosions. Neither of them used the power of their fruits. Until they crashed into a tree numbered 22, causing an explosion on impact as the tree began to be destroyed, falling to the side. They destroyed the tree? No one could believe what they were seeing, as the colossal tree began to fall with everyone in its range. Right after that, in the midst of the smoke, fire and light began to emerge. They finally decided to use their powers. Explosions with beams of light began to cover the air while flames flew against them, exploding despite the blinding light of everything that was happening. They continued, but the flames seemed not to lose while exploding with the energy of light. The tree finally fell, with a loud sound with everything on its side rising, but an even bigger explosion occurred in the middle of the fight between the light and the flames, a sound so loud that it resonated throughout the archipelago, while Luffy and Kizaru clashed against each other in a clash of swords. Luffy held his sword, Ace, with Haki, clashing with Kizaru's sword of light with Haki too, while the sound of steel echoed everywhere generating rays of Haki. The impact quickly overshadowed all others as everyone felt the explosion of impact flying to all sides. This looks interesting. Zoro couldn't help commenting as the girls tried to keep their hair neat with that vortex of wind. Zoro was watching it with a desire to grow as well, seeing a sword fight. That sword. Rayleigh commented looking at the blade in Luffy's hand as it emitted strange red sparks. Meanwhile, the wind from the impact began to run across the entire island and reached the port of that area, as everyone felt the wind and shivered with the impact of the fight. Ridge looked at it wondering what was happening. He stood up after he was knocked out by Hugo some time back as soon as he tried to fight them. Admiral Kizaru is fighting against Monkey D. Luffy. Ridge approached, coming from that part of the island at that moment while frowning at that level of fight. This is bad. In a building nearby, X-Drake was looking into the distance with a furrowed brow. It seems it's still not safe, Ridge said, but suddenly an explosion occurred behind them. What is that? Ridge, Budge, and X-Drake looked surprised at that. The smoke began to clear, revealing a man with a large axe and two pacifistas appearing. What are those things? Budge asked with a furrowed brow, looking at the two machines, similar to 7 warlords of the seas they knew from the newspapers. We finally arrived. We better handle the situation here and go find the uncle who must be fighting Monkey D. Luffy. It seems we found some pirates. Sentomaru commented, turning his attention to the men looking at him cautiously. It seems we found some pirates. He commented and pointed. PX4 and PX5. He exclaimed. The pacifistas quickly looked over everyone, identifying all the outlaws in the crowd, among them Budge and Ridge. Capone Budge, bounty, 138 million Baileys. Ridge, bounty, 108 million Baileys. The two pacifistas identified the pirates and suddenly opened their mouths, and quickly, both pirates had wide-eyed looks before seeing a beam emerging from there and flying directly at them and exploding the area. The pacifistas saw the explosion and looked at the other pirates running, while their gazes turned up, where X-Drake was. They identified him but did not attack. X-Drake, bounty of 220 million Baileys. Authorization denied to attack. They announced, after all, this pirate was a Navy agent disguised as a pirate. Alright. Sentomaru commented understanding and continued walking. Let's see the uncle. He murmured, and before he could react, an explosion occurred near them as an entire building was destroyed. You're damn proud woman. A woman shouted at another. Shut up your emo woman and you damned. The other complained. Sentomaru stopped to look at the two women and quickly identified them. Then Smoke Raju and Trafalgar D. Lamy. Your bounties are to keep you alive, however, we can hurt you a bit to capture you. He commanded, and the two pacifistas quickly advanced on the women after he sent the pacifistas. Raju and Lamy, who were arguing against each other, noticed the approach of the pacifistas and raised an eyebrow at that. Feeling that they were coming to attack, they quickly attacked them. Lamy drew her blade and with a serum, she reappeared behind the pacifista, splitting it in half. Meanwhile, Raju simply jumped into the air, spinning her body and placing her leg to deliver a kick that went through the middle of the pacifista. They weren't even close to being able to attack the women as they were destroyed. What? Sentomaru was shocked by that. Hey, you bastard. Next to him, Raju appeared in front of him with her leg on fire. Don't attack us while we're arguing, you idiot. She said and kicked Sentomaru before he could react, who the next moment, flew like a bullet, hitting between the buildings of the town and opening a path as it impacted each of the houses in its path. Chapter 277, Sabati Archipelago 13. In the south of the archipelago, Nojiko, Robin, and Kuina were strolling around while shopping at some stores. How can I help you? The seller couldn't help but recognize these women after looking at them for a few seconds. After all, everyone on this island knew about the presence of the Straw Hats here, and many kept that information to themselves to avoid meddling with this group. See, how can I help you, ladies? The man began to tremble. After all, these women had bounties that exceeded 9 digits. I like this cup, I want to buy it. Nojiko said, wanting to add it to her collection for coffee sipping by the stains. She spoke in a gentle tone, as if dealing with a villager from Kokoyasi village. Yes, of course. It's yours, for free. The man was still terrified. No need, there's a price tag here, I can pay for it. Nojiko declined the offer and took out some Bailey notes, handing them to the man who agreed reluctantly. After all, he did not want to contradict the pirate woman after she said she would pay. You scared him so much. Robin commented, laughing. Nojiko sighed. That's the downside of fame, everyone thinks we're bad people. Nojiko spoke, but understood very well why that was. The newspapers always depict us as people who destroy everything, especially the reports of the captain. Kuina intervened with the obvious, after all, who could question Luffy after he destroyed some islands here and there in his Ifrit form, something that always made the front page of the newspaper. After that, they resumed walking through the streets, while the crowd of ordinary, law-abiding people moved out of their way in fear. Meanwhile, a group of Marines were hiding at a distance with weapons, merely observing, not that the women didn't know about them, but they didn't care. Everything seemed normal, until a tremor occurred, followed by a huge sonic explosion to the north of them. What? Robin looked in that direction. Something's happening over there. Could it be Luffy? Nojiko wondered about her husband. Seems like he did something, but who could fight him in such a way? Kuina asked. Let's go there. Nojiko suggested, and the others then began to jump into the air with Moonwalk, heading to that part of the archipelago. To the east. Usopp, Bippo, and Chopper were in a toy machine when the explosion was felt by them, causing the entire park to shake slightly. The entire crowd turned towards that direction while the three were in the midst of it. What is this? Is someone fighting? They wondered, not knowing exactly what was happening at that distance. In a corner from there, the same could be everything while the music competition was being contested by Scratchman, Apu and Uta at that moment. However, the explosion quickly made all the speakers crumble with a horrible sound, causing everyone to put their hands over their ears. Scratchman Apu swallowed hard, wondering what was happening, while Uta wasted no time and jumped into the air, imagining that Luffy had done something. Usopp was in the air using Moonwalk as they met. Do you know what's happening? She asked. No, it's too far for me to know. Usopp said. The captain must have encountered an admiral or something. Bippo suggested. Bippo, Luffy asked you not to use your devil fruit, remember that? Usopp said, and Bippo nodded. Knowing the situation, he could not pass the information to the world government that he was the user of the float fruit model, flying human devil fruit that sent the meteor, so he had to keep a low profile until the war. Luffy and Kizaru continued their intense fight, as they began to knock down trees as their sword fight went on. A collision between the two swords quickly created a cut that flew from there, and tree number 15 ended up being the impact of the collision. The tree just made a line, before being removed from its bottom with a clean cut. The people in the city saw this and screamed in fright as the tree began to fall, bursting all the bubbles in its path. Run! The people screamed, running from there, as the tree fell and a line of fire and light collided in the air. The swords clashed once more with Haki in front of each other as the tree fell behind them, Kizaru maintaining a serious look behind his glasses, even while keeping in character. This is tough. You seem stronger than back at Inai's lobby. Kizaru commented, his mouth forming a strange shape. You could say I gained a lot of benefits from our last fight. Luffy commented, he wasn't even in his hybrid form, after all that form increased his attributes 6 or 7 times, however this time, Luffy was using his devil fruit at 80 times, so using 90 times currently in speed might be the reason for Kizaru's comment. Even though Luffy still didn't have the endurance and strength of that form, he hadn't taken any damage yet by using his speed to protect and evade. That's scary. Kizaru commented upon hearing that. He had received information about Luffy's growth being a great danger to the sea, but seeing him in person is quite frightening. Kizaru now returned to his sword, one that he had also obtained information about from Sengoku. This sword is Gold Roger's. I wonder how you got it. And why does it seem to be a weapon with a devil fruit? Kizaru asked, seeing the sword emit flashes of armament Haki and a strange red lightning. Clearly that was not a swordsman's skill or Haki. You are full of questions, Kizaru, let's just fight and focus. Luffy suggested, activating the devil fruit and pushing Kizaru back. He immediately followed him. Kizaru was thrown by the red lightning and quickly stabilized without any injury and began running in the air. He quickly noticed that Luffy was following him. Kizaru passed by a giant tree, as Luffy flew with high speed and did not get off his tail. They continued to run through the island like cat and mouse while people only saw flashes flying over the air, so fast that some didn't even realize as they tried to flee the battle from a distance. Only the more experienced knew that something had passed by there, as explosions began to happen right behind in the air. They passed by a second tree as they ran, circling around the sides. Luffy went on the opposite side of Kizaru while appearing above Kizaru and tried to strike with a sword. Kizaru defended himself and distanced from Luffy with a spin of light, appearing 50 meters away already in position to attack Luffy with his two fingers crossed. He quickly launched several flashes at Luffy in the air as one of the most powerful blows, while Luffy tried to dodge, punching with his hand a huge ball of flames.